She woke up in a closed space, a small dark room where there was not a single glimmer of light, as if darkness had swallowed everything around. The space pressed on her with its silence, and a feeling of hopelessness penetrated every cell of her body, as if time had stood still here. Through a small window covered with dust and dirt, which barely let in a dim light, they passed her food carefully wrapped in an old rag, as if confirming that even in these gloomy conditions, life continues its leisurely flow. On a heavy iron saucer lay a dry piece of stale bread, a lonely piece of candy in a bright but faded wrapper, and a glass of water stood there like a symbol of extreme need and poverty, as if she were a prisoner doomed to these pitiful crumbs to sustain life. One day, in a ray of weak light coming through a narrow crack, the girl noticed the vague silhouette of a man whose movements were unhurried and careful as he carefully poured her some food, as if trying to remain unnoticed, but still arousing her curiosity. But in the darkness, it was difficult to see anything other than the dim glow of the mask on her face, which hid all features and expressions, creating the feeling that in front of her stood only a vague silhouette, shrouded in shadows like a riddle that remained unanswered. After the girl had eaten her modest portion of food, her strength would fail and she would faint, losing consciousness completely. At that moment, someone would carefully change her clothes, acting with amazing gentleness and care, which was both strange and touching. Since she was 10 years old, she had been locked in this gloomy dungeon, where impenetrable darkness reigned. The ceiling was covered with a thick layer of dust, and the dirt in the corners mixed with loneliness, creating an atmosphere of cold and hopelessness that never left her for a moment. Empty green eyes looked up lifelessly, and the girl herself, despite everything she had experienced miraculously, retained her sanity, not allowing her mind to give in and not go mad from the oppressive prison. All this happened because of them. The white ghosts who, like shadows, whispered insulting words to her promising death, making her soul tremble with fear and despair, as if hoping for her destruction and fall. Another spirit, suddenly appearing in the darkness, struck his evil companion, ordering him to be silent and no longer to utter terrible words addressed to the living girl, thereby protecting her from further mental torment. These ghosts were the souls of dead people who became victims of an evil creature, and only she could hear them and see how they wandered endlessly in this dark space, having no peace. With smiles on their faces, the spirits reminded her that 7 long years of her imprisonment in this dark, merciless place had already passed, and with each passing day her soul became more and more fragile from the hardships. Saying various nasty things and evil wishes, the ghosts began to circle above her head, congratulating her on the fact that she was already 17 years old. Their voices sounded like a mixture of irony and horror, as a symbol of the fact that time was inexorably passing. The little girl had lost all her memories. She couldn't remember her name, she couldn't remember how she ended up in this basement, and everything around her seemed alien, like a dream that was impossible to remember completely. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, the spirits began to talk about some strange, frightening guys who were somewhere outside on the border of her perception, and their words sounded like a harbinger of something incomprehensible and dangerous. The girl shuddered, her heart beat faster when she heard these words that perhaps someone had finally come to save her, and a weak spark of hope flashed in her soul, like the last light in a dark tunnel. Despondently with indifference, the lady continued to lie motionless, as if all hope had left her, because she was sure that if someone really needed her, someone would have come for her much earlier. Her eyes widened in shock and surprise when she suddenly heard a strange sound in the absolute silence, as if someone had disturbed her lonely peace in which she had been for so long, and her soul was filled with anxiety. The sudden, loud noise made the poor thing instinctively cover her ears, trying to protect herself from the pain that hit her like a bolt of lightning, and even in her wounded state, this unexpected pain was extremely excruciating. Tears burning her cheeks rolled down from fear. The girl shook with horror, afraid that death was about to take her into its arms, and she could see no way out or salvation from this dark, hopeless dungeon. Suddenly, one of the ghosts flew up to her as if trying to bring at least a little hope, and turning to the captive, quietly said that she should not be afraid of freedom because it, after all, was the light that would free her from all suffering. Suddenly a deep crack appeared in the wall, and through it, as if coming out of the darkness itself, a man in a long cloak entered, dust settling on his face, hiding his features, giving him an air of mystery and a certain enigmatic threat. The captive lying on the floor saw the boy and immediately remembered the story of the knight who saved the maiden with the same golden hair as hers, and her heart began to beat faster, as if fate itself had brought her to this moment. With tears in her eyes, the little girl, not believing her eyes, wondered whether this handsome man was really a prince as she dreamed, or whether it was all just a figment of her imagination. But despite her doubts, hope for a miracle that could change the world was born in her soul. The man, seeing her reaction, dropped to one knee and, bowing his head, asked for forgiveness, with sincere regret, explaining that he was only a hero, not a prince, with eyes the color of a clear blue sky and dark hair that hid part of his face. In the distance through the windows, one could see a beautiful house that resembled a fairy tale castle. The architecture was exquisite, with golden elements that gave the place an atmosphere of grandeur and beauty, as if it was created for miracles. The men gathered in the hall before the ruler condemned the events, declaring that it was good that at last the Archduke had been defeated, and all worries were gone, but their voices sounded with some tension, as if something remained unresolved. However, despite their joy, the emperor remained unhappy. Lost in his thoughts, his gaze was directed to the side, and his hands were thoughtfully clasped at his chin, creating the feeling that his soul was tormented by some hidden doubts and worries. For several years, the Archduke had already ruled over lands that lay beyond the empire's borders and was described as a terrible demon that everyone feared, leaving behind a trail of destruction, and fear becoming a symbol of invincible strength and dark power. Not only did he study dark magic, but he also conquered the northern territories of the country, expanding his power and sowing terror among the population, which grew stronger every day, and his name was pronounced with a tremor in voices. His conquests left only graves evidence of his cruelty and destruction, and the operation to capture this man lasted a whole year, becoming more difficult and dangerous with each passing month, like a shadow that did not want to go away. And so on that day, the Archduke was finally defeated by the Duke, but the Emperor, despite the victory, continued to remain uneasy, as if in this triumph there was some hidden threat that he could not expose. All the anxiety came from the fact that the villain who was defeated turned out to be the younger brother of the emperor himself, a member of his blood and throne, which gave the ruler a feeling of uncertainty and a hidden threat that was difficult to comprehend. The subjects began to spread rumors telling the emperor that no clear evidence of the evil man's crimes had ever been found, except for one captive who remained in the basement, whose silence and fear only increased the strange questions about the real motives. The girl herself, having spent so long alone, was on the verge of insanity. Her mind was greatly undermined by the time spent in these gloomy and stifling conditions, and her look reflected everything that she had experienced in this terrible isolation. The men in the hall began to talk nervously, fearing that the reaction of his subjects might be negative, and that the emperor might face the indignation of the people, which would be directed towards him for his participation in these dark events. The emperor, sitting on his throne, stated decisively that without the Duke of Montefeltro, they would not have succeeded, they would not have carried out the coup that overthrew the tyrant, and that his intervention was key to destroying the empire of fear that the Archduke had erected. Javier Montefeltro was an aristocrat, the owner of a duchy about whom there were dark rumors claiming that he was against the empire and its rule. His name was associated with possible treason and secret conspirators. For this reason, it was decided to take advantage of the Duke's desire to destroy the evil Archduke in order to end his tyranny and put an end to this conflict, using his ambitions as a tool to achieve their goals without revealing the whole truth. The nobleman's family symbol was a snake depicted on a green flag with sharp, deadly fangs, symbolizing his danger and cunning, as if nature itself stood on his side, hiding his true intentions and creating an aura of mystery and menace. The ruler, sitting in his throne, felt the snake of his family crest coiled around his neck as a symbol of his debt to the Duke for his help in the victory, and he realized the gravity of his decision, which entailed many consequences. Meanwhile, those who were somehow connected to the Archduke began to worry, realizing that after the events that had taken place, their destinies could be at risk, and the danger hidden in the shadows was creeping closer and closer to their lives. The ruler pressed his fingers to his head, trying to suppress the painful thoughts that were haunting him, and fought with himself not to be distracted by unnecessary things, but the internal conflict did not leave him like a shadow that relentlessly followed his every step, filling his soul with anxiety. The mysterious captive was clearly an important person since the villain, the Archduke, decided to leave her alive rather than kill her, which made the ruler wonder about the hidden motives behind this decision and what kind of secret this girl could be, whose life turned out to be more valuable. The ruler, pointing his finger forward, gave the order to his subordinates to hand the girl over to the duke, deciding that now all responsibility for her fate and all further actions would lie with Montefeltro, and it was he who would have to decide what to do with her future. Now all responsibility for the fate of the captive passed to Montefeltro, and the ruler could not help but think about what consequences might arise from this decision, because every word and action of his now acquired a completely different weight. As the lady sat in her hot bath, she listened to the rumors that the servants were discussing, talking about the victory over the villain and how his power had finally been overthrown. These conversations seemed to fill her heart with a strange uneasiness, making her wonder about the consequences of what had happened. And the Archduke was killed by the same Davier who had once saved the poor captive, and this event became a turning point that opened new horizons for everyone involved in this conflict, but also left many unsolved mysteries. Fearing that she might be considered an assistant to the former villain, the girl decided to behave quietly, reservedly, and unsuspiciously, avoiding unnecessary attention and carefully hiding her true feelings so as not to become the object of suspicion. One of the maids, noticing that the girl needed help, tenderly extended her hand to her, helping her out of the bath, and although her gesture was simple, it showed genuine concern for her at that moment, which was filled with many feelings and emotions. After she had been washed and tidied up, she looked much better with long, beautiful hair, and her new dress gave her appearance a refined and delicate look, as if she had regained her true beauty. The maids took her long hair carefully, offering to cut it as it could get in the way and cause inconvenience, but still their actions showed concern, and they were only focused on the best for her. Suddenly, the girl remembered the kind spirit that had once taught her to open up to the world and accept the kindness of others, and these memories, like a bright beacon, returned her strength, filling her heart with a sense of hope and confidence in the future, which now seemed clearer. She grabbed the fabric of the sheet with her hand, collecting her thoughts and trying to find the right words to express her feelings and decisions that seemed important at this moment when her whole life began to fill with new meaning. The maids shuddered when they heard the words of the girl who suddenly declared that she wanted to have her hair cut because until then she had remained silent, and the woman's request seemed unexpected to everyone who looked after the lady with care and great attention. The girl smiled and blushed when she heard the compliment that her hair was unusually soft and gentle, and feeling a little embarrassed, she decided to respond with mutual praise, enjoying the moment that gave her such sincere joy. The maids flinched in surprise, and the girl felt that perhaps she had said something wrong because their reaction was unexpected and full of bewilderment, but she did not immediately understand what exactly caused such surprise, what made them wary. However, soon all the servants laughed, and one of them waved her hand cheerfully, assuring that such a thing happens extremely rarely, and their laughter was not mockery at all, but only an expression of surprise caused by such an unusual and unexpected request from the sweet girl. The woman gently took the girl's golden strands of hair, offering to begin the haircut. Her movements were soft and confident, and she tried to make this process as comfortable and pleasant as possible for her charge so that she felt safe. The scissors carefully cut the hair, and immediately a new offer came: the lady to try on a new dress that was specially prepared for her so that she would feel truly special and worthy of respect. The outfit was a vibrant red with delicate white stripes, and the fabric was so expensive that it literally oozed elegance and luxury, as if every detail had been carefully thought out to enhance its beauty. The girl sat obediently enjoying the attention and care while the maids worked on her, helping her create a new hairstyle and carefully selecting every detail of her outfit so that she looked impeccable and felt confident. Suddenly, another man entered the room, and his sudden appearance attracted the lady's full attention. With his arrival, the silence was broken, and as if by instinct, the girl looked up, trying to understand who had interrupted her peace. It was the knight Dietrich, who stood in the doorway with his head held high and a stern expression on his face, looking down at the maids as if doubting their ability to correctly appreciate the importance of the moment and expressing displeasure at their playful behavior. The man declared in a loud and firm voice that the stately duke had ordered the captive to be brought to him, immediately emphasizing the importance of fulfilling this order. The words sounded like a peremptory demand that did not tolerate objections. Having said that, there was very little time. The guy suddenly decisively picked up the girl in his arms, intending to carry her to the master, feeling the importance of this moment and not wanting to lose a second because his task was urgent and imperative. He quickly walked out into the street, not paying attention to what was happening around him, and continued walking, carrying the girl in his arms, as if his only goal was to deliver her as quickly as possible to a place where she would be completely safe, far from the danger that awaited them. However, as soon as they were outside, the girl instinctively covered her ears with her hands, trying to drown out the loud and frightening sounds that seemed to increase her fear and anxiety, not giving her a moment of peace and making her heart beat faster with excitement. What scared her most were the ghosts that floated around the castle, their cries of pain and terror echoing in the air. Only she could hear their suffering, which brought her an unbearable feeling of anxiety and fear, as if these tormenting sounds were penetrating her soul. The woman's hand reached forward, her gaze fixed on the old green fire that emanated from the ghostly entity, mysteriously flickering in the darkness, as if this glowing figure was connected to an ancient and forgotten past. The girl winced in pain, her face distorted with inner torment as she listened to the spirits, dreaming of being freed from their eternal torment, striving to dissolve into ashes in order to finally find peace and escape from their endless suffering. Clutching her head, the beauty fell to her knees with incredible force, seized by excruciating agony, her body trembling with excitement, and her mind was consumed by nightmarish visions and painful memories that did not give her a moment of peace. Knight Dietrich noticed how the lady in his arms was shaking with fear. The woman's body was filled with anxiety, and her eyes, full of uncertainty, could not find peace despite all his efforts to reassure her of safety and confidence that she was in good hands. The man tried to calm the lady down, saying that the Archduke was dead, that no one could hurt her anymore, but the little girl still couldn't get rid of her fear. Her fragile heart continued to beat faster, and the shadows of terrible memories burned in her eyes. Suddenly, the Prince of the Isidore Empire appeared before them, holding a cigarette in his hand, his gaze mocking his words derisive. He contemptuously called the knight the Duke's loyal dog, showing complete disregard for male dignity. The man, although displeased, nevertheless politely greeted the heir to the throne, fully observing the norms of etiquette despite the obvious irritation from meeting this arrogant and impudent prince. Isidore threw away his cigarette without the slightest embarrassment, and with interest, almost with a slight challenge, asked who the girl was that the knight was holding in his arms, standing like a statue, unable to move from his place from confusion. Suddenly, the guy grabbed the former captive by the hand, pulling her towards him, but before he could take the next step, he was immediately stopped by a stern voice full of authority and impeccable determination which made him freeze instantly. The knight suddenly realized that the gentleman was referring to the very moment when he failed to keep an eye on the charming lady and allowed the prince to snatch her right out of his hands without even having time to try to stop him, since he turned out to be much faster and more decisive in his actions. The lovely girl, stunned and shocked by what was happening, froze, realizing that an aristocrat stood before her, and at that moment her gaze froze in mute amazement, because she recognized in him the very savior who had once saved her from trouble. Moreover, this man turned out to be the same one she saw for the first time in 7 years, and as it turned out, he was a merciless swordsman whose name was on everyone's lips, and his skill in combat was so impeccable and dangerous. With a slight smile on his lips, Davier Montefeltro stopped. His face was soft, His eyes were bright and kind, and his body was strong as if tempered by time and struggle, which testified to his inner strength and caring. Isidore immediately took the girl into his arms confidently, explaining to the Duke that he was only trying to help the aristocrat by taking on part of his burden, not wanting to leave him alone with a heavy load. Davier, however, did not show the slightest excitement or surprise. His face remained calm and emotionless, as if he was impenetrable to all the words and actions that were happening around him, which only emphasized his inner strength. Isidore, feeling the tension of the moment, froze in place, his gaze full of curiosity and tense anticipation, because he was truly interested to know how the nobleman would react to his words and actions, and what kind of reaction his bold act would cause. The man recalled a conversation with the emperor during which he promised to ensure complete safety for anyone who would have a decisive influence on the victory over the Archduke, promising a reward that would be worthy of gratitude for such a great deed. The aristocrat said with a mocking cold cynicism that the ruler of the empire had given him full permission to dispose of the captive, doing with her whatever he wanted, as if her fate were just a game for his pleasure and amusement. Davier, without losing a second, picked up the frightened lady in his strong arms and with confidence and solemnity announced her to everyone as his bride, as if it were the most natural step, not paying attention to the shock and bewilderment reflected in their eyes. The knights, stunned by the words of their commander, stood motionless, as statues unable to believe their ears, and their looks reflected complete confusion and incomprehension, as if they could not comprehend what they had just heard, unable to recover from the surprise. The beauty, shocked by such words, could not believe that this guy, with ease and without hesitation, called her his bride as if she was nothing more than a debtor for the help provided, and fate was decided without her knowledge, as if her own feelings did not matter. The Duke, without hesitation, confirmed his words once again, emphasizing that he would indeed take this former captive as his wife, not hiding his determination and confidence, as if this were the most natural continuation of events. Some time passed, and turning to his master, Dietrich asked him with curiosity what he had in mind for further action, because in his eyes one could read anxiety, mixed with a certain expectation of what should happen next. The stately man sitting on the throne with his chin propped up in his hand recalled his earlier words as if they were an inevitable part of his plan, demonstrating calm and confidence in his decisions despite their boldness. At the indignant cry of his knight, the master waved his hand carelessly, and then, grinning, laughed at the expression on the prince's face when he, without hiding his shock, found himself captivated by emotions which was absolutely unusual for him, because he always tried to remain restrained. Everyone present was in complete shock when they learned that the devil's guinea pig, whom everyone feared so much and who was considered cursed, was going to wear the crown and become the Duke's wife, which seemed impossible and unimaginable to everyone around. Davier, looking away, added with a slight smile that, in essence, no one would care about this marriage, and at his age one needs to do a few stupid things, so as not to regret it when old age comes and the realization of lost opportunities. At that moment, hands slammed loudly on the table, creating a sound that echoed throughout the room, attracting the attention of everyone present, causing them to freeze in alarm and watch what was happening carefully, feeling the tension in the air. Dietrich, who had been calm until then, was stunned by such careless behavior of his master and could not hide his horror and indignation, because the Duke, it seemed, did not think about the future, not caring about the consequences of his decisions, which seemed extremely unreasonable. Unable to bear it any longer, the knight approached the Duke with a serious expression on his face, asking him to explain the reason for such stupid and unfounded actions, trying to understand what was really hidden behind these hasty actions and decisions. The rich nobleman, thoughtfully touching the window quietly and confidently, declared that he had simply fallen in love at first sight with the Archduke's captive, could not contain his emotions, and took it as a sign of fate, something that could not be ignored. Dietrich, not hiding his surprise, replied that he had never met this lady before, and asked questions, not understanding how one could become so quickly carried away by someone you did not know before, especially in such a difficult and dangerous situation when everything should come first. To these words, Davier, without losing his confidence and with a slight smile on his face, noted that his subordinate could not do his job properly, interfering in matters that concerned only the Duke himself, and that he should not meddle in matters that were none of his business. The knight suddenly realized that the gentleman was referring to the very moment when he failed to keep an eye on the charming lady, and allowed the prince to snatch her right out of his hands without having time to stop him, because he turned out to be much faster and more decisive in his actions. The knight suddenly realized that the gentleman was referring to the very moment when he failed to keep an eye on the charming lady and allowed the prince to snatch her right out of his hands without even having time to try to stop him, because he turned out to be much faster and more decisive in his actions. The calm Dietrich, feeling guilty and embarrassed that he had failed to do his job properly, humbly and regretfully asked for forgiveness, realizing that he had been a very bad servant and had not lived up to the trust that had been placed in him. After all, most likely as soon as the owner saw this lady, he immediately planned to do something with her to strengthen his position as a duke, realizing that such a connection could influence his position and future decisions. Bowing respectfully, the guy apologized once again for his behavior, realizing his guilt. But the handsome Davier himself just brushed off his words as if not attaching any importance to them, continuing to maintain his calm and control over the entire situation. With a haughty look, the handsome man reminded that the knight was important to him, and his plan like an old, loyal friend whose presence was necessary for the implementation of plans that could not be realized without his support. Dietrich, in complete shock, blushed, not expecting to hear kind words from the master, who as a rule was reserved and rarely shared his thoughts or made confessions, and now his heart sank in anticipation of what would happen next after the unexpected gesture. The subordinate became tensely wary when he heard that the aristocrat had entrusted him with an important task clearly related to matters that required special attention, and he knew that this assignment would not be easy and perhaps even dangerous, taking all his strength. At this time, the worried maiden sat on the sofa with her hands folded in front of her and her head down, not knowing how to answer the questions, the answers to which could not come to her memory. The maiden felt confused and anxious, not understanding how to cope with this difficult moment. The lady remained silent, hearing the question about her name from the man sitting opposite her in the chair, feeling the tension growing with every second, and her thoughts intertwined in confusion, not allowing her to formulate any kind of answer, as if the words were stuck in her throat. It was a calm psychotherapist named Devian, who came to talk to the former captive, trying to help her understand her past and thoughts, but his task was not easy because the answers were hidden somewhere deep inside her soul. The woman's hands nervously clutched the hem of her dress, betraying the inner tension and growing fear that was becoming stronger with each passing second, as if a heavy weight was pressing on her heart, not allowing her to feel the slightest sense of security. The girl was afraid of the upcoming meeting, but at the same time her heart was drawn to see her savior, the very man who unexpectedly for everyone declared her his bride, and whose intentions remained a complete mystery to her. Her soul was tormented by the rumors she heard about the Duke, about his cold cruelty and indifference, and she could not shake off the fear that he was capable of performing on her the same terrible experiments that were whispered about in the corridors. The little girl felt like a fragile doll that could easily be broken. Her thoughts were confused, and her inner fear turned into a feeling of complete helplessness, not giving her the opportunity to pull herself together and find peace. Devian, taking an elegant pen in his hand, asked the patient in a soft and reassuring voice to calm down, to focus on the present moment, and not to think about the past. He assured her that she was completely safe, and that everything would definitely be fine despite her worries. Davier, despite his outward coldness and detachment, in fact, turned out to be a man with a kind heart, whose actions had hidden reasons and good intentions, and that is why he decided to make her his duchess, protecting her from the past. They continued their conversation, and the girl, clearly embarrassed, refused to tell her name, admitting that she could not remember, as if her memory had been clouded or irretrievably lost in the labyrinth of horrors she had experienced that she could barely comprehend. The psychotherapist, observing her reactions with restraint, methodically wrote down all the girl's answers on the board, trying to capture the details of her experiences, because the lady, who had spent a long time in captivity, hardly communicated with anyone and only once briefly saw a face in a mask. The mysterious man whose presence she felt even through the heavy silence of the room seemed ominous and suspicious to her. There was a hidden threat in his behavior, and this image was firmly fixed in her memory, leaving a feeling of impending danger. After each meal, her condition worsened sharply. Weakness, nausea, and dizziness overwhelmed her as if her entire body was fiercely resisting any attempt to restore strength or fill itself with something vital. When the nice therapist asked if she had been taken outside during her confinement, the girl shook her head from side to side, as if the question were awakening unpleasant memories that she would like to forget forever. But then, like a flash of realization, she remembered a strange detail. Every time she woke up in her dark cell, she noticed that her body had been carefully cleaned, as if someone had taken special care to maintain her appearance despite the horrors of her situation. The spirits that hovered above her head like light clouds whispered in different languages, telling of a strange stranger who seemed to appear often in her dreams, leaving behind a feeling of uneasiness and mystery, as if the shadow of the past was following her. Her thin, feminine hands involuntarily clenched into fists, reflecting the internal tension and powerlessness in the face of these secrets that she could neither unravel nor drive away, as if these memories tenaciously held her in their claws, not giving her peace. In the new world where she found herself after many years of imprisonment, the lady's life suddenly changed. She was surrounded by attention, showered with luxurious outfits, exquisite dishes, sweets that looked like works of art, and generous gifts. At times, the girl became convinced that everything that was happening was just a wonderful dream, into which she had accidentally fallen by the will of fate. And because of this, she did not want to wake up afraid to again face the same suffering and the lonely, dark world that was her reality. Sometimes she would meditate that in another life, she could have become a true aristocrat, enjoying a carefree existence amidst grandeur and luxury, where captivity, fear, and pain would not exist at all, and where every day would be filled with light and peace. Sometimes the girl indulged in dreams, imagining herself as a beautiful princess who lived in a majestic castle surrounded by impregnable walls, where she was guarded by a mighty dragon, ready at any moment to protect her from any evil. At other times, her fantasies became simpler but much more touching. She dreamed of a loving family, of a mother and father who would take care of her, hug her, and surround her with warmth, giving her that simple but so important love that she always yearned for. Not remembering her parents and not having the slightest recollection of what they might have been like, she often imagined that instead of them she was surrounded by dolls, warm as if alive, who gently embraced her, as if trying to replenish the lost sense of security. The lady froze for a moment, lost in her scattered memories, when she heard an unexpected question about whether she had been called by any special name before, but there was no answer in her memory, and this plunged her into even more confusion. The psychotherapist froze in his chair with interest, hearing that there were so many of those whom the beauty had heard that it immediately became difficult to believe. This revelation made the man think about how many secrets this big world hides. The majestic palace with black roofs and high towers rose like a symbol of grandeur and mystery, attracting the eye with its monumentality and grandeur, which at the same time inspired fear and fascination, creating an atmosphere full of grandeur. The charming girl explained that she often communicated with the ghosts who lived in this building, and their stories were so unusual and mysterious that she herself could not always understand where reality ended and the world of spirits began. The psychotherapist was completely shocked to learn that the girl had the ability to see spirits, which seemed to him something completely incredible and inexplicable, beyond everything he had encountered, and of course he was not prepared for this. After that, he frowned, thinking, and carefully asked if she had seen ghosts now, especially after she was saved, since this moment was key to understanding what was happening to her, and could shed light on the mysterious events. The Archduke's castle was engulfed in flames, blazing in a terrible flame of hatred, as if enmity and anger itself were coming to life in this fire, kindling it with every new glance at the ruins that remained of the majestic building. Suddenly, the girl stopped abruptly, stopped speaking, and quietly said that she had just seen a spirit, as if something invisible had caught her attention, and her words became full of anxious foreboding. Her index finger, slender and exquisite, suddenly stretched forward, as if it itself was trying to point to something hidden from the eyes of others, but for her it was completely obvious, as if it were a reality invisible to others. At that moment, one of the spirits invisible to most found itself sitting on the doctor's shoulder, like a shadow watching his every move, which left a strange feeling of an invisible presence nearby. A loud and insistent voice was heard in the hall, calling out for someone with a desperate intonation, and its cry echoed throughout the palace as if the very atmosphere was saturated with this call, breaking the silence and leaving a feeling of inexpressible uneasiness in the air. The doctor was outraged by such insolent words spoken by a knight who was not much younger than him, because his bad manners and impudence could not help but arouse internal discontent and feelings of anxiety in the experienced psychotherapist. Dietrich was sure that his interlocutor was talking nonsense. He could not believe that the Duke's bride could really see ghosts, since such things seemed to him simply impossible, absurd, and without any logical basis. Devian himself, a man with vast experience and many years of practice, admitted that for the first time in his 10-year career, he was very scared after talking to this mysterious patient, which was a real shock for him and a reason for reflection. The man, after some thought, suggested that the lady simply had a vivid imagination, or perhaps her visions were the result of psychological trauma that she had never been able to work through, not realizing how much pain affects the perception of reality. The widower and his interlocutor discussed how it was extremely difficult to maintain a clear and sober mind after a long period of confinement in the dungeon, where the darkness and loneliness affected the mental state, causing people to lose touch with the reality around them. Now Madame spoke calmly and sensibly, as if every thought she had been weighed and considered, and perhaps her defensive reaction to stress had caused the visions of ghosts, creating the illusion that she was perceiving something supernatural. Frowning, Dietrich asked if the doctor had learned anything about the experiments the Archduke had been conducting for the subject was too important, and perhaps it could shed light on what was happening to the lady, his patient. Devian became serious and, lowering his voice, explained that it was indeed an important and delicate topic, but the lady was not yet ready for such a conversation, especially after her traumatic experience, which left a deep mark on the female psyche. After being kidnapped by the villain and his evil rituals, the girl's head seemed to become clouded and her memories disappeared, as if wiped away by a thick fog, leaving her in a state of complete incomprehension of what was happening to her and what all of this really was. The lady's head was covered with such force, as if by invisible hands, that she could neither see nor remember anything, and perhaps this was the result of some dark and cursed ritual that plunged her into a state where her consciousness seemed to be eclipsed by powerful external forces. The knight sighed heavily when he heard the words that the girl could actually see spirits, because it seemed to him complete nonsense without the slightest basis in the reality with which he was familiar, and contrary to all his experience and common sense. After the terrible experiments carried out by the devil, only burnt bones remained from his former victims, on which it was difficult to discern any details, for they resembled only traces of unimaginable suffering, and the people themselves seemed to have been completely erased from history itself. The knights felt sick when they discovered the remains of the people, because horror and fear filled their hearts, and the terrible reality that they saw made them feel like they had become a part of something much more terrible than they could have imagined. The psychotherapist continued his speech, claiming that Madame sometimes saw ghosts on the ceiling, and even communicated with them earlier, which seemed extremely strange and difficult to explain to him, as if the girl's mind itself was subject to an incomprehensible influence. Dietrich was completely shocked by these words, because indeed they found bones on the ceiling, which seemed like an incredible and terrible discovery. However, they decided to keep it a secret from others unable to explain what really happened in this mysterious place. It was a fine day, and the room was filled with coziness, expensive furniture, an exquisite candlestick, a soft chair. Everything around created an atmosphere of peace and comfort, as if nature itself was favoring this moment of relaxation, embracing with its warmth and peace. One of the nice maids, Tara, her name was, said with a smile that if the mistress would practice every day, then soon she would be able to walk normally like everyone else, confident that all efforts would definitely bring good results. After that, they agreed that it would be worthwhile for the lady to help comb her long and silky hair, thus creating another moment of care and attention that could bring not only comfort, but also a feeling of coziness and care. The comb, gently untangling the golden strands, moved with incredible tenderness and precision, as if each strand was a precious gift. And in this silence, filled with a light rustle, there was something soothing and peaceful. At this time, the beauty was in complete shock from the kindness that others showed her. The girl sat on a chair, not believing that they could care about a person so much, as if everything that was happening was some strange, incredible reality. Suddenly, another voice filled with contempt was heard calling the lady stupid, and at the same moment, the soft paws of a cat, like an invisible shadow, appeared at the entrance to the room, breaking the silence with its mysterious and enigmatic presence. It was a cat black as the night sky without stars, with eyes bright and burning like two blazing fires. The look was penetrating, as if she knew in advance that for this girl, eviction from the house was only a matter of time, as if there was a secret inaccessible to others. The girl frowned at such rude words. This animal was impolite and impudent, as if it did not realize that she could be offended by violating the boundaries of respect. Such behavior could not help but cause her a feeling of irritation and discontent. The maid began to smile, thinking that this cute cat could belong to the mistress, but she, restraining herself, answered with a denial, not wanting to be associated with such a strange creature that seemed to stand out too much from everything familiar. It turned out that one of the spirits had escaped from the Archduke's house and had entered the cat, taking its form to continue its dark deeds. This discovery was unexpected and alarming, giving rise to a feeling of anxiety in the heart that could not remain indifferent because such forces were dangerous. The lady tried to ignore the evil, unfriendly spirit which seemed to be trying to attract attention to itself, constantly interfering with her thoughts and actions like something invisible but always present nearby, creating a feeling of an inevitable presence. The beauty froze in shock when she first saw her appearance in the mirror. The blue dress and golden hair gave her an indescribable charm, and she looked truly beautiful, as if nature itself had gifted her with her beauty. The woman's hand involuntarily grabbed the hem of her dress, her fingers trembling slightly with excitement, as if not believing that the reflection in the mirror really belonged to her, and not to some unfamiliar lady whose features were so unusual and alien to her own image. The maiden felt as good as if she had found herself in a green meadow strewn with flowers, and her tender heart was filled with bright joy, as if the smile itself and loud laughter were her natural companions in this wonderful moment. The lady turned to the side as she heard the maid address the knight who had come to visit them, the loud and confident voice breaking the silence of the room, attracting the attention of everyone present, and creating a feeling that something important was about to happen. The man stood in the doorway, his figure clearly outlined against the passage, and loudly announced that he had come for the beauty for whom the Duke had been waiting for a long time, giving his words a touch of importance and inevitability, as if he had been sent to carry out an inevitable task. The luxurious setting around the bowl on the table was decorated with gold items and jewelry, creating an atmosphere of splendor where every element seemed to be designed to highlight the impeccable taste of the hosts. The butler, who was standing nearby, politely asked the lady to wait, explaining that the gentleman was a little late. The young man assured her that he would be ready to meet her any minute, despite the slight delay, and that this would not interfere with the plans. The girl sat down at the table and began to carefully examine the room, rich in elements of luxury and sophistication. Every corner of the dining room was thought out to the smallest detail, as if people with impeccable taste and high position lived here. The lady clutched her veil tightly in her hand, feeling the tension growing because she was completely unfamiliar with the intricacies of etiquette, which made her nervous, despite all the external self-confidence that hid her inner doubts and deep worries. The lady stood in amazement at the beautiful flowers in the vase on the table. She always had a special admiration for such plants, and their beauty filled her heart with joy, as if they were a real source of inspiration for her. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a man's low voice was heard behind the lady, and the woman's hand froze, almost touching her face, when she felt his closeness, which immediately made her wary, as if intuitively warning her of danger. It was the Duke who, noticing her confusion, inquired with curiosity and tenderness why the noblewoman clutched the cutlery so tightly in her hand, as if something were greatly disturbing her, and his attention was attracted by her unusual behavior. The nobleman laughed jokingly, noting that the aristocrat seemed to be about to stab someone with the fork, clutching it so tightly in her hand that it looked as if she was ready to use the cutlery as a weapon, and his words brought a smile. The pink flowers in the vase gave off a light and elegant scent, and their petals, as if filled with soft light, softly reflected the sunbeams penetrating through the window, giving this corner of the room an extraordinary, almost magical charm. The lovely girl, having greeted the nobleman with her mouth open and her eyes full of surprise, could not believe that he had approached so quietly as if he had appeared out of nowhere, and her surprise was so strong that she could not even immediately utter words. When the girl tried to stand up to greet the man, he gently placed his hand on her shoulder, reassuring her as if at that moment she did not need formalities, and the man's gesture seemed unnecessary, but at the same time, caring. Kind Davier, tilting his head to the side with a slight smile, asked his interlocutor not to tense up and leave her legs alone, inviting her to relax and feel more comfortable, despite all the inconvenience of this moment. The handsome Duke then stood up to take a seat opposite her, taking a chair to sit comfortably at the dining table, creating an atmosphere of ease and respect for her presence that was unexpected and at the same time extremely polite. The guy was very interested in talking to his interlocutor and learning more about her life in captivity, especially considering her age, because he hoped to reveal all the secrets of her past, which seemed to be covered in many mysteries. The lady felt a little awkward at the compliments, which sounded dubious, especially when he remarked on how beautiful she looked, despite the fact that it seemed she was in prison. She could not understand how this was possible and did not know what exactly he meant. The cat was probably right, she thought, because it was unlikely that anyone would believe strange stories about ghosts, especially if they sounded so incredible that even the heroine herself could hardly believe in their plausibility, feeling doubts tormenting her own mind. The sweet maiden resolutely clutched the edges of her dress, unwilling to give in. Her gaze was full of determination, and every line of her body radiated fortitude, as if she was ready to stand her ground, despite all the doubts and questions of those around her. Loudly and confidently, like a true beauty, she declared that she had never lied about herself, that she could really see the other world. She assured everyone that her words were not fiction, but the truth that she had to face and survive despite all the doubts of those around her. Suddenly, the Duke, with a slight smile on his face, asked the lady to address him by name, emphasizing that his name was Davier and not by any title or noble rank, which seemed unexpected to her, but quite polite. The lady blushed at these words because if a nobleman dared to call her by his name, it meant that he trusted her so much that he was ready to renounce all formalities and titles, giving her a unique privileged position. After that, he leaned forward, curiously asking her name. The girl hesitated because despite all her efforts, she could not remember her name, as if this important fact was lost in the thick fog of her thoughts, vanished into the space of forgotten memories. There was an empty, strange chaos in the beauty's head, where familiar and alien names were intertwined, as if they were chained and hidden in a thick fog. This created a feeling of disorder and uncertainty, as if she was lost in a world she could not understand. The aristocrat, leaning back in his chair and with a serious expression on his face, gently remarked that the maiden seemed to have forgotten her name, and suggested that she come up with a completely new one that would perfectly suit her current state. Putting his hand to his chin, he began to pronounce various names, hoping that one of them would please his interlocutor. He was looking for a name that could reveal her true essence, as if it were a key to her inner world that had yet to be discovered. The girl liked the name Lucilia so much that she literally beamed with happiness. Her face lit up with a bright smile, and her eyes filled with light, as if joy itself had taken on an unusual form and illuminated everything around, filling the atmosphere with warmth. turning out to be the name of a rare flower in a vase. This word symbolized the strength to survive even in the most difficult conditions, steadfastly resisting time and bad weather, as if it gave hope for the impossible, reminding of endless fortitude and perseverance. After these words, the lady pressed her hands to her chest, feeling how her heart began to beat faster as if it was trying to break out from excitement. The feeling filled her with light and energy, as if the moment had become that elusive source of strength and liveliness that captures the soul. The beauty smiled, and her smile was like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds, illuminating everything around. She happily agreed that from now on, this would be her new name, which seemed to bring with it a feeling of freshness, renewal, and lightness, filling her soul with light. After this, the nobleman, with a light, almost imperceptible movement of his hand, gave the order to the servants to serve the food, and they immediately began to lay out exquisite delicacies on the luxurious table, which was soon filled with the aromas of freshly prepared appetizing dishes. There was quite a lot of food. The table was filled with aromatic meat, fresh salads, tender vermicelli, and delicious porridges, creating a real feast that not only delighted the eye but also awakened the appetite, ready to devour everything that could be imagined. The girl didn't even have to think about manners, because she had servants for that who were always ready to help and tell her what cutlery to take, creating an atmosphere in which she could relax and enjoy herself. One of the maids, with a graceful gesture, offered the lady a steak cooked in such a way that every piece was truly delicious, filling her senses with pleasure from every bite, as if it were a real work of culinary art. The beautiful lady was in no hurry to open her mouth and start eating, feeling a strange feeling inside her. Even though there was so much food in front of her, she still didn't want to eat, as if something deep inside her was preventing her from fully enjoying the moment. When suddenly Davier, with a cold and emotionless expression on his face, asked sharply and abruptly if the lady could not do her job properly. His gaze was so icy and piercing that everything around seemed to freeze from all tension. The lovely Lucilia sighed with relief when she realized that the aristocrat's words were not addressed to her, but to the maid, who, immediately bowing with respect, blushed and, embarrassed, asked for forgiveness for her mistake, feeling ashamed of her oversight. The man, puzzled, began to ask if his interlocutor had not liked the food. The kind noblewoman, stammering, answered that everything was fine, but her attempts to hide her awkwardness and uncertainty in the situation were obvious, and her face betrayed her embarrassment. The man was angry because the girl did not answer him, did not show due interest, and continued to remain modestly silent. This, in his opinion, only aggravated his irritation, increasing the feeling of misunderstanding of what was happening between them. Lucilia clenched her teeth, feeling fear pierce her heart like a cold arrow. The noblewoman lowered her head, as if trying to hide this whirlwind of feelings that was fettering her from within, not allowing her to think clearly and focus on what was happening around her. Suddenly the calm Duke shuddered, hearing the request of his companion, who, with visible concern, asked him not to get angry and not to shout at her. The woman's words sounded with a soft tone, as if begging the guy for understanding and great tolerance. Sadly, Lucilia admitted that she herself did not know what was happening to her. The female voice was filled with confusion and regret, as if she was looking for answers to questions that she could not find inside herself, not knowing what to do and what to do next. Hearing the honest and sincere answer, the guy smiled, and his teeth flashed against the smile, and his hand rose next to his face as if he was trying to hide his reaction, but sincere pleasure burst out involuntarily, expressing his emotions. Davier laughed loudly, amazed at how sweet and determined the beauty looked. The loud feminine words sounded with such confidence that he could not help but laugh furiously, admiring her unwavering determination and strength of character. The lady flinched as the man stood up from his seat and walked confidently towards her. His movement was decisive and quick, which caused her a slight feeling of anxiety, as if her heart was fluttering in anticipation of something unknown. His hand gripped the back of the chair tightly, and Davier himself, with complete confidence in his voice, promised that he would certainly help the lady. His gaze was full of determination and firmness, and it was obvious that he was ready to fulfill his promise without paying the slightest attention to doubts. The man took a fork with a piece of meat on it, and without losing a moment, extended it to his companion, offering her to try it. And this gesture was at once polite and insistent, as if he was ready to do everything to take care of her well-being and comfort. Lucilia was embarrassed by such attention, feeling like a small child who was surrounded by excessive care and caution. The woman's face turned red, and she tried to hide her awkwardness, feeling how shame spread across her skin. The meat on the cutlery looked incredibly juicy and appetizing. Its surface was covered with a golden crust emitting such an appetizing aroma that it only increased her hunger, despite all her internal resistance. A tense silence hung between the young couple. The guy froze with a fork in his hand, his gaze riveted on the beauty as if he was impatiently waiting for her to finally open her mouth and make her choice, deciding on an important step. Realizing that the lady was not going to eat meat, he was offered to serve her chocolate pudding, an exquisite and beautiful dessert that seemed to be able to charm her, becoming not only a pleasant but also a magnificent conclusion to the entire meal, giving it a special, almost magical touch. Davier, with a gentle smile, offered the lady a taste of the dessert, and judging by her reaction, it was clearly to her liking, and this became immediately obvious when her face lit up with delight at her first bite, and the noblewoman could not hide her pleasure. The girl did not take her eyes off the spoon with dessert, not believing that this amazing sweetness was really meant for her. Her doubts were mixed with growing interest, as if the incredible beauty was discovering something new and unusual. The beauty's eyes widened as she tasted the dessert, her face momentarily frozen in a mixture of shock and pleasure, as if she couldn't believe the amazing taste that had just filled her senses and taken over her thoughts. The pudding she bit into was truly magnificent. Its taste was incredibly delicate, and its texture was airy and exquisite, so that each bite brought incredible pleasure and confirmed her in her decision that this was the best dessert. Lucilia was all red with happiness. Her face was shining with joy because enjoying the dessert was simply incredibly pleasant. Each piece brought her unprecedented pleasure, as if the whole world had shrunk at that moment, and nothing could overshadow her happiness from this amazing taste. The little candy she had often been given as a child could not compare to this exquisite pudding she had tasted for the first time, as it was incredibly delicate and refined, like the embodiment of perfection of taste. The ghosts were right when they talked to her in the basement about the outside world opening up new horizons for her, because this dessert became a real confirmation that there are things that can give joy and radically change perception. Davier, noticing her satisfied expression with a slight smile, called his interlocutor a sweet tooth, which made Lucilia blush slightly, but a mischievous sparkle flashed in her eyes because she was not at all embarrassed by his joke. Lucilia herself overcame her fear and was no longer afraid to try new dishes. Her confidence grew with each taste, and she realized that she was ready to discover many new things, not limited to the usual and familiar things. Freshly baked bread just taken out of the oven filled the air with an incredible aroma that instantly attracted attention. Its delicious, slightly crispy crust beckoned, promising a real pleasure for the most sophisticated taste buds. The girl had never seen such delicious bread in her life, which the Duke tore with his hands with such appetite and pleasure, as if this moment was a real holiday for his senses, and every piece was a small miracle. Finally, Davier sighed and explained that he was no prince, so it was unlikely that this beauty could be a kidnapped princess. It was all just a joke, and his gentle smile made it clear that he did not mean anything serious. Smiling, the kind beauty said with sincere admiration that those who had the good fortune to try such delicious food were undoubtedly truly lucky, because its taste was so divine that it could not be described in words. Davier noted with a smile that Lucilia seemed clearly happy to become a duchess, and his words sounded like a slight mockery, but they contained genuine admiration for her reaction to such an important change in her life, full of new perspectives. The lady froze for a moment with a stupid expression on her face, looking at her future husband, not accustomed to the idea that she had received a title, because it was so unexpected for her that she could not even immediately comprehend the full extent of what was happening. She was so carried away by her thoughts and new concerns that she forgot about the guy's words that the aristocrat wanted to take her as his wife, and for a moment the woman's heart sank and her mind was confusedly trying to comprehend what was happening in her life. Typically, aristocrats married only members of their own class because their unions were always carefully thought out and concluded within a narrow circle where every step played a decisive role in strengthening the status and power of the family. With her head down full of embarrassment, Lucilia admitted that she knew neither etiquette nor manners, and her words sounded with genuine regret, as if she felt out of place trying to adapt to the new conditions. Davier chuckled with a slight smile, and said that the main thing was that her legs got better, and the rest, etiquette and manners, could be learned because nothing prevents a person from developing and learning new things when there is a desire. Propping his head on his hand, the handsome man complimented his interlocutor, jokingly remarking that the beauty could be a kidnapped princess. His eyes sparkled with merriment, and it seemed that the nobleman was completely charmed by her innocent and slightly confused look. Lucilia frowned, unable to understand whether the Duke was joking or speaking seriously, because her mind was overflowing with new emotions and doubts, and everything that was happening seemed something incredible, almost impossible, and fantastic, like a dream. Finally, Davier sighed and explained that he wasn't really a prince, so it was unlikely that this beauty could be a kidnapped princess. It was all just a joke, and his slight smile clearly showed that he didn't mean anything serious. After which the man added that it was only up to her whether she would agree to help him or not, and there was a slight insistence in his words, as if he still expected that she would accept his offer and agree to this path. But it's true, no one knew what would have happened to the girl if Davier hadn't taken her, protected her from danger, and offered help in this difficult moment. Her fate could have turned out completely differently, and she could have found herself in even greater danger. The tea was poured from a teapot into an exquisite cup decorated with a beautiful blue pattern, which gave the dishes a special charm, creating an atmosphere of coziness and tranquility, despite the difficult conversations that were taking place at the large table. Davier hastened to console his friend, suggesting that he could become her guardian and take her in as an adopted daughter, and when the time came, marry her off to a good and worthy man which would ensure her a safe and prosperous future. The woman's fingers anxiously clutched the rim of the cup, and her hands trembled slightly, betraying her inner anxiety because she was faced with a choice that could significantly affect her life and future, and she still could not make a final decision. The fine weather, clear blue sky, and green trees created a feeling of peace and tranquility, filling the air with freshness, as if the whole world outside the window was resting, enjoying a moment of silence and harmony. Looking out the window, Lucilia was lost in memories, thinking about her life as a slave, hidden in the shadows of the dungeon, and how she was now finally free and new opportunities were opening up around her. The lady thought and realized that if they did not marry, what would happen to the Duke who was so attached to his honest family and duties? What actions would he commit, and what fate awaited him if a determined will did change the course of events? With a smile on his face, Davier calmly replied that he would be fine, that he would cope with any difficulties, but his words were interrupted by the firm statement of sweet Lucilia that she agreed to become his wife and share the future with him. The man froze in shock, shaken by such an unexpected and confident answer, because his bride's consent struck him to the depths of his soul, and he could not immediately realize that the fate of their relationship had already finally decided everything for them without the possibility of changing the course of events. However, for the beauty, the Duke was the first person she saw after many years of living in a dark dungeon, and his appearance seemed like a real miracle, as if he were a knight from a fairy tale who had come to rescue her from the shackles of imprisonment. He was like a hero from an ancient fairy tale who came to free the beautiful lady like a knight fighting against the dark forces, and his presence filled her life with light and hope, faith in a new beginning and liberation. After a little hesitation, Lucilia, thinking about fate, firmly promised herself that she would definitely become the wife of this brave and worthy Duke, because in his eyes she found her confidence and strength to change her life forever. Evening had come, the sky was painted in the soft pink and golden hues of the sunset, and the plants and trees, as if revived by the light of the fading day, straightened their branches, creating a wonderful and calm feeling of beauty and completeness of this moment. The servants sitting at the table quietly discussed the upcoming event, the imminent marriage of their master, trying to understand what this meant for their future and how life in the house would change after such an unexpected step that he decided to take. The butler's name was Baron, and knowing the master's daring, youthful character, he was sure for a long time that this was just a joke, that the gentleman would never make such a serious decision. But with each passing day, his doubts became more and more dispelled. But soon it became known to everyone that Davier had indeed found himself a bride, a woman who had been a prisoner of the evil lord, and this stunned everyone in the house because no one expected that such an important step would be taken with this woman. One of the knights noticed that earlier the gentleman had even helped the young lady with food, feeding her with a fork, which seemed incredible to everyone who knew him as strict and unapproachable, because such care was not at all characteristic of his previous behavior. The maids were in complete shock and horror when they saw their master so kind and caring, because this was a completely new image for them, and they could not believe their eyes that such a domineering and stern man could be so attentive. However, everyone admitted that it would be wonderful if a new mistress appeared in this house, a calm, sweet, and kind woman who could bring comfort and harmony to their large house, filling it with bright light and incredible warmth. Lucilia was truly magnificent in her red dress. Her golden hair, like the rays of the sunset, fell softly on her shoulders, and her long eyelashes gave her look an extraordinary mystery, as if she was the embodiment of beauty and grace. Clapping her hands, the maid joyfully began to say that indeed the maiden was flawless and looked stunning in any outfit, and this beauty was so natural that it seemed she could wear any clothes and remain perfect. The knight felt awkward in the company of other servants because he was the only one who treated the master's bride with caution, perceiving her as something unfamiliar and mysterious that disrupted the usual order in the house. However, all the servants, despite their doubts, agreed that Lucilia, before becoming a real mistress, had to gain an education in order to meet all the requirements and duties that await her as the Duke's wife. The knight shuddered in amazement when his interlocutors began to doubt the master's abilities, asking whether he would be able to give everything that the young lady needed, and his face distorted with indignation because such talk was unacceptable to him. The guard slapped his hand loudly on the table surface, expressing his displeasure, as if trying to quell the disturbing conversations that, in his opinion, could undermine respect for his master, thereby disrupting internal harmony and order. He jumped up from his seat, unable to contain his anger and unable to contain his emotions, began to shout at the maid for such behavior, demanding respect for the owner and confidence in his decisions, because such doubts had no right to exist in a big house. The butler intervened in the conversation calmly and reservedly, stating that their duke was already 21 years old, and therefore he was a mature man, fully capable of providing his bride with everything necessary for their life together, and all doubts were groundless. Baron was ready to stand up to the knight and defend the honor of the good lady without hesitating for a moment, for the boy considered it his duty to stand guard over her dignity, no matter who doubted the decisions of their good master. The guard himself froze, suddenly realizing that the lady's gentle and refined character could have softened his master, because his cruel words and actions might not have been so if he had better understood her gentleness and sincerity. Bowing respectfully, Baron added that they had a much bigger job ahead of them than they could have imagined, but despite the difficulties, he was confident that they would cope, because with a gentleman like Davier, one could always count on success. She blushed when she heard others call the Duke her husband. The word, which suddenly sounded like a sharp blow to her inner state, caused a storm of embarrassment in her soul, because she could not get used to the idea that life had changed so quickly. He sighed heavily and covered his face with his hand, trying to calm himself down, because his head was splitting from the tension, and each moment seemed more painful than the previous one, as if his mind could not find a solution to the current problem. Looking at the sky, which was gradually becoming covered with clouds, the guy leaned against the railing and thought that it would have been much easier if the Duke had really fallen in love with the lady at first sight, because then their destinies would have been much easier and more natural. The next morning night fell, and the mansion, as if frozen in time, stood in silence, as if seized by deep thought, hiding behind its walls unknown secrets and invisible paths, preparing for the onset of a new chapter in its long history. The fire was still burning merrily in the fireplace, its warm flames flickering in the darkness, filling the space with a soft, cozy light, creating an atmosphere of peace and comfort, and each crackle of the wood sounded like an elusive step of time rushing away into silence. The cat, snorting discontentedly, turned to the lady, attracting attention with her playful and at the same time daring look, as if wanting to say that not everything around her was arranged according to her rules, and she herself was ready to be the center of attention. After this, the animal, without hiding its displeasure, declared that the place next to the lady was not at all suitable for it, and grumbling, they both sat on the bed as if laughing at this strange state of affairs. The girl closed her eyes, trying to hide her smile, and answering the cat said that he was grumpy because he was not happy with the cat food that was offered to him, and therefore expressed his displeasure in the way only an animal could do. Ignoring her grumpy companion, the beautiful Lucilia sank into her thoughts, enjoying the soft feeling of the bed and imagining how well she would sleep on it, forgetting about all the worries and feelings after a long day. Looking around, the lady could not help but admire how large the room was, and how luxurious, expensive furniture filled the space, creating an atmosphere of comfort and luxury that she had been waiting for so long. Suddenly the cat hissed, attracting the attention of its owner, as if asking if she had been listening to her, because the animal was clearly unhappy with being ignored and was now trying to get attention back to itself, not wanting to remain in the shadows and be forgotten. Jumping up abruptly, Lucilia suggested that perhaps the animal would also like to have a name, since it could not remain without attention, just like her new world, which was filled with increasingly strange and unexpected moments. She blushed when she heard others call the Duke her husband, and this unexpected word, like a blow to her inner state, caused a storm of embarrassment in her soul, because she still could not get used to the idea that her life had changed so quickly. The cunning and wild animal, noticing how her cheeks were flushing, began to tease her mistress, laughing at how embarrassed she was because the Duke was now her husband, and how this fact made her feel awkward and insecure. Suddenly the cat said that Davier is not a baby name, which caused confusion in the beauty, and she rose from the bed in surprise, as if trying to understand what could be hidden behind this statement and why it affected her so much. Suddenly, there was a deafening roar of thunder, and a thunderstorm rolled across the sky, as if nature itself was responding to her confusion, adding an air of mystery and power to the night, as if it were a harbinger of something important that was about to happen. Lucilia shuddered in horror and fear, along with her pet, frightened by the sudden onset of bad weather, and felt her heart squeeze with panic, fear of the unpredictable force of nature that could fall upon them at any moment. The girl, clutching her ears with her hands, tried to drown out the deafening roar of the thunderstorm, but her gaze was fixed on one point, and fear was clearly reflected in her eyes, as if she was unable to escape from this unbearable feeling of anxiety and complete helplessness. The storm continued to rage, and the sky grew darker, as if a hidden threat in the clouds continued to loom over the house, filling the space with gloom and tension. It seemed as if nature itself was reflecting the lady's inner struggle, fighting the storm of her emotions. The room was dark, and the only light came from the window, a weak strip of light penetrating the space, creating an even more ominous atmosphere, as if the entire world outside this room was hidden in shadow and abyss. Clutching the sheets with her hands, Lucilia couldn't stop the trembling that took over her body, and every muscle in her body shook with fear, as if the thunderstorm raging outside the windows was penetrating her soul, and she found it difficult to cope with this feeling of anxiety. The cat, frightened by the storm, was worried about her mistress and anxiously asked what was wrong with her, trying to understand why the noblewoman was so restless and feeling how the woman's heart was filled with concern for the lady who was so dear to her. As a result, Lucilia, hugging her pet, lay under the blanket, shaking with fear and worried, wanting to hide as soon as possible from this terrifying world which seemed so unpredictable and threatening to her. Previously, the courtiers had said that thunder was a sign of rain as well as the Archduke's bad mood, and Lucilia could not help but recall these words, realizing that the storm in the sky could also be a reflection of her husband's stormy feelings and experiences. Suddenly, Davier's voice rang out asking with genuine concern if Madame was okay. This warm and caring tone calmed her down a little, but Lucilia still couldn't shake off her anxiety, feeling a storm of emotions still raging in her chest. The maid crossing the threshold of the room quietly reported that she heard a strange meowing, and her look was filled with surprise since she did not expect that such sounds could be heard on this silent night, especially because of fear when she saw the lady trembling with horror. A sleepy Davier also entered the room, asking in surprise why it was so noisy, as if he found it difficult to understand what could have so disturbed his fiancée, and his tired eyes searched for an explanation of what was happening. The cat, screaming indignantly as if no one could understand her making sounds full of fear and irritation, felt her small body shaking with rage because not a single sound reached the ears of those around her, and she could not explain her anxiety. The animal was quickly grabbed by the aristocrat's fur and it hissed angrily, showing its teeth as if trying to defend itself, but its resistance was futile as it found itself in the hands of a strong owner. Lucilia flew out of the blanket and looked in surprise at her future husband, who entered her chambers at night, and her eyes reflected a slight fear as well as confusion from his sudden appearance in her personal space. Without thinking twice, the guy quickly threw the cat aside as if not paying attention to his reaction. His attention was completely focused on the fear that was visible in the eyes of his bride, and he decided to first console the lady. Taking the lady's hand tenderly, Davier tried to comfort her. His gaze became soft and full of care, and despite his determination towards the cat, the guy sincerely sought to help her overcome her anxiety and regain her lost peace. Suddenly Lucilia shuddered in horror, hearing again a loud clap of thunder outside the window, which seemed like it could tear her soul apart, and her body was again overcome with a feeling of anxiety, as if the elements raging outside reflected her inner fear. The girl screamed in fear and, without thinking, rushed headlong into the arms of her fiancé. The woman's heart was pounding in panic, and she desperately sought at least some support, trying to find comfort in this nightmare that had engulfed her soul. The Duke was taken aback by her unexpected behavior and asked with noticeable anxiety if everything was all right with his beloved, not expecting such a reaction. A soft look penetrated her frightened eyes, trying to find an answer to this question, as if his soul was looking for comfort in her experiences. Realizing that the girl was truly scared, he began to calm her down gently, running his hand through her hair, trying to convey his confidence and sense of security, while his warm and encouraging smile was supposed to give her a sense of security and peace. Seeing that the girl was truly scared, he began to calm her down gently, running his hand through her hair, trying to convey confidence and a feeling of complete safety, while a gentle smile was supposed to remind her that she was safe and that the anxiety would soon disappear. Davier, despite all the anxiety that surrounded them, was clearly in good spirits. His face shone with calm and kindness, and he readily devoted himself to comforting his bride, realizing that nothing was more important to him than to give support at this moment. Suddenly, the aristocrat turned to the maid, calmly saying that he was going to stay a little while with the bride, and that the maid should not wait for them, because at that moment his attention was completely focused on Lucilia, and he did not want to rush things. The candle in the darkness was the only source of light, its flame trembling in the air, creating soft shadows on the walls, and its warm glow filled the room with coziness, as if symbolizing a quiet night and protection from external alarm. Davier sat next to the girl lying in bed, leaning against the sheet, his gaze filled with concern. He carefully watched her every movement, trying to make sure that she was safe and felt calm, without the slightest worry. When the nobleman wanted to leave, his hand was stopped, as if she couldn't let him go, and Lucilia, grabbing his shirt, couldn't let him go. Her gaze was full of pleading, as if she was afraid to be left alone in this world of fear and anxiety. Lucilia lay in bed, clutching her future husband's shirt with her hand, not letting him leave, because she was afraid to be alone at that moment when everything around seemed so foggy and fragile, like a fragile glass world. A smile of understanding appeared on the boy's face. He felt her anxiety and fear, and despite his strength and confidence, he realized how important his support was to her in this anxious moment when she needed his presence more than ever. Placing his hand on the bride's head, Davier promised that he wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. His words were filled with warmth and confidence, and Lucilia felt her fear ease a little knowing that he would stay by her side. The cat squeaked indignantly. She was not happy that the Duke had decided to stay with them, and she expressed her displeasure as if her little kingdom had been violated, and now she had to share attention with a man whom she barely accepted. The nobleman sat down next to her and began to read quietly, his voice sounding soft, but the cat, not agreeing with his presence, called him dangerous, as if intuitively understanding that behind the external kindness there was something more that could threaten her comfort. The pet, as if worried about its owner, ordered her to be attentive and not to succumb to the kindness of the handsome man who was clearly two-faced and should not be trusted in something that seems too beautiful and perfect. The Duke himself interrupted the girls' conversation with the cat, asking them why his bride was still awake, his voice full of curiosity and his gaze soft and caring, trying to understand what exactly was troubling Lucilia and why she couldn't calm down. Looking at the pet next to her, Lucilia blinked sleepily but was afraid to lie down as if all this could be just a dream, and she did not dare to believe in the reality of what was happening because the anxiety for her soul did not leave. With her head down, the maiden quietly called for someone to help. Her voice sounded like an echo in the void, and around her there was only darkness, and the nightmare she had dreamed left the feeling that reality and sleep had merged into an unimaginable mixture. Sitting alone on the cold floor, Lucilia called out in horror, but no one came and she was overcome with a feeling of hopelessness. Where had everyone gone? Fear covered her because at that moment she felt that the world that surrounded her was empty and unprotected. It was raining from a dark and gloomy sky, its drops falling, creating the feeling that nature itself felt her despair, and the dark clouds seemed to intensify her inner anxiety, not allowing her to find peace in this restless world. Lying on the floor, the lady stubbornly repeated to herself that she was not in captivity, that it was all just an illusion, but the more she tried to convince herself, the more confused her mind became, and fear became her inseparable companion. Looking at the closed balcony, the girl thought that at this moment loneliness was felt especially acutely, and the rain outside the window only intensified this feeling. Its drops falling on the glass seemed to her as lonely and lifeless as her own thoughts. The only thought that came to her mind was how to escape, because the rain was wetting her head, and the horror in her eyes reflected confusion, as if all of reality was falling on her, and she did not know how to get out of this labyrinth of great fear. Suddenly, another person approached the lady, disturbing her peace, and her heart skipped a beat when she saw that it was Davier, and in his arms was a cat. At the same time, his smile, despite all the tension of the situation, remained sincere and warm as ever. With a warm smile, he asked where his bride was going on such a night in the rain, as if he did not realize how much this situation could frighten her, and his concern was obvious, despite all the hostility she felt towards this unexpected night meeting. Lucilia felt her face slowly turning red with embarrassment, not knowing what to answer. Her feminine thoughts were intertwined, and she remained standing as if in a daze, not understanding how to explain her sudden loneliness in this storm that had engulfed her soul. With courage, though, a little nervously, she asked her future husband what he was doing there. Had he really come to have fun? Her voice trembled, and she herself felt how her words reflected her own confusion more than real anxiety. From such an untactful question, Davier himself froze in shock. His eyes widened in surprise, and he did not immediately find what to say, because he did not expect that his concern would be perceived in such a way, and his face reflected confusion. The guy carefully covered the lady's head and body with a blanket, trying to protect her from the cold so that she would not freeze or get wet in the rain. His movements were full of tenderness and attention, as if he was sincerely worried about her well-being. After which, the handsome man, without thinking carefully, picked up the bride in his arms, not wanting her to get sick. His hands were confident, and her heart was again touched by his attention, because in his act there was not only care, but also a hidden power of affection. Lucilia, all red with shyness, finally agreed that it was time for them to go home, her words barely containing her embarrassment, and her look was full of gratitude and some uncertainty, because she did not know how to properly react to such concern. The servants, noticing the return of their masters, hurried to them filled with anxiety for the young and fragile lady, and their eyes expressed sincere concern because they could not help but notice how her condition caused concern to everyone. Seeing that his maiden was left in need and required care, the man handed her over to the servants, ordering them to wash her from the rain and dirt, and the cat, noticing the change, settled down nearby, also receiving her attention to help calm her mistress. After this, Javier Montefeltro, noticing that Dietrich was standing next to him, looked at him with restraint and without delay gave the order to follow him, his voice sounding firm and decisive as always when it came to carrying out his orders. The knight, without saying a word, lowered his head and nodded in obvious agreement, realizing that it was his duty to obey orders, even if they did not always correspond to his wishes, and at that moment his silent agreement conveyed far more than any words could have expressed. The cat said loudly that Dietrich had probably been beaten by the lady's husband since he was responsible for her protection, and had failed to properly look after her safety. Her voice sounded like a reproach, since she intuitively felt that something had gone wrong. Suddenly, the Duke entered the room dressed in a dressing gown and slippers, his relaxed appearance contrasting with the tension that reigned in the room, and he seemed ready to relax despite the seriousness of the situation. With a smile, Javier Montefeltro asked if his fiancée did not want to tell him anything, hinting at her silence. His tone was soft, but the glint of curiosity in his eyes showed that he would not leave this question unanswered, wanting to hear her answers. The man leaned closer to her, and Lucilia, blushing, apologized for causing him trouble by disappearing in the rain at night, her words full of remorse, and her eyes showed genuine concern for his feelings. Suddenly, the husband, smiling, pinched his wife on the cheek, trying to cheer her up because the beauty looked sad, and he understood that sometimes, even in moments of tension, you need to give her a little lightness and joy to dispel all the gloomy thoughts. After this, the handsome man, without taking his eyes off her, gently knelt down in front of the noblewoman, and with concern in his voice asked if everything was okay with her. His words were full of warmth and attention, because for him her well-being was more important than anything else in the world. The lazy cat yawned and stretched out carefree on the carpet, stretching out her paws as if the whole day had been too long for her, and her movements showed obvious boredom, while the room was filled with an atmosphere of complete peace and relaxation. The Duke suddenly looked like a child, his face taking on a childish resentment, folding his hands in front of him, and he fell into deep thought, wondering if Lucilia really didn't care about him at all, but only continued to talk about the guards and other worries. Hearing that the lady was still worried about him, his spirits perked up as if his soul had been enveloped in warmth, and his heart began to beat faster, because now that she had shown concern, he felt that he had to answer her questions without leaving them unattended. Earlier, the man noticed how the cat was behaving strangely outside the window, and feeling the need, decided to take the animal because he could not leave it on the street on such a night, especially knowing how strongly it was attached to Lucilia. Suddenly, the handsome man picked up his wife in his arms and with a playful smile asked if she thought they were having fun without her, because the man's voice sounded with a slight hint of a joke, although he understood that her concern was much deeper. Lucilia, her head down in disappointment, explained that she was left alone in the cathedral, and in her loneliness she thought that everyone had abandoned her. Her words sounded quiet and sincere, like a confession that she was afraid to say out loud. Javier Montefeltro, noticing her worries, ordered the lady not to worry anymore, and tried to calm down. His voice was calm and firm, but there was a softness in it, like that of a man who is ready to support her at any moment. The Duke tested the water with his hand, and upon seeing that the temperature had cooled, he sighed with relief, as caring for her comfort was an important part of how he cared for her during these difficult moments. When the bride, having lowered her tired feet into the water, sighed with relief, Javier quietly told her to wait a little, promising that now he would heat the water himself so that she could enjoy real comfort and coziness. Suddenly, the water began to bubble cheerfully, and Lucilia was surprised to see her husband using his magic to heat the water, and her eyes filled with genuine admiration because she did not expect him to have such amazing abilities. With a blush on her cheeks and a slight surprise in her eyes, Lucilia enthusiastically realized that her husband turned out to be a sorcerer, and at that moment, her heart filled not only with gratitude, but also with touching pride for his unique abilities. Now the bath became warm and surprisingly pleasant, as if the air itself around was filled with coziness and calm. Lucilia felt how the tension was leaving, and the soft temperature of the water was enveloping her, creating an atmosphere of serene peace and complete enjoyment. Holding her husband's hand, Lucilia sank into the warm water with a sense of peace, enjoying being surrounded by Davia's caring words, and a feeling of gratitude grew in her soul for his compliments, which made her heart lighter. With a slight, almost imperceptible smile on his lips, Davier promised to be gentle with the bride, and his words sounded so confident and warm that Lucilia instantly felt how his promise enveloped her soul, giving a feeling of comfort and security. Looking at him in confusion, Lucilia asked if he would be as soft as pudding. Her words sounded with a hint of fun, but there was a slight mischievous sparkle hidden in them, making Davier smile even wider. The nobleman stood there, awkwardly realizing that his words had been taken completely differently than he had expected, and at that moment he felt a slight confusion that made him stop and think for a moment. After that, he lowered his head down, holding back a barely noticeable laugh, and with a sincere expression on his face, he admitted that now, after everything that had happened, he did not want to part with her even more, realizing how much she meant to him. With a smile on his lips and a slight respect for himself, Davier Montefeltro explained that he had recently received a letter with an invitation from the emperor himself, and this news made him think a little, but he continued to look at Lucilia with a slight excitement. He continued that now he had to go to the capital, where a huge palace awaited him full of the most important affairs and tasks of the empire, and despite this, the thought of separation from her made his heart worry and yearn. Lucilia froze in surprise because she had never heard anything about the capital before, and her thoughts suddenly became confused from the new information, which seemed so distant and mysterious that it was difficult for her to immediately understand everything that was happening. Looking down, the girl began to worry that her presence might disturb her husband, and a heaviness settled on her heart as if she were not quite in her place, feeling that his attention might be distracted by her proximity. At that moment, when her thoughts were lost in worry, she was suddenly brought out of her thoughts by a gentle hand on her head. Davier Montefeltro promised that in his presence no one would dare to touch her, and his words were full of confidence and care. After which the aristocrat, with a slight sigh, rose from his seat, and looking reservedly at his wife, explained that it was time for him to leave since business required his attention, and the moment had come when he could no longer remain in the chambers. Saying goodbye to her, Davier Montefeltro, with a slight smile on his lips, promised that he would return soon, and despite his busy schedule, his words sounded confident, as if he wanted Lucilia not to worry about their temporary separation. Kind Lucilia silently accepted his decision, holding back a slight uneasiness, and shivering softly from the cold, wished her husband a good journey, hoping that his return would not take long, and that everything would soon get better as she wished. Lucilia sat in a new dress decorated with bright flowers and seemed not to notice the call, absorbed in her thoughts. The maiden seemed to have completely dissolved in the silence and tranquility that reigned around her, and the world seemed to her independent of everything else. Suddenly, as if from a deep sleep, the girl woke up. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she turned her attention to what was happening around her, as if realizing that her thoughts were far away, and the world continued to move without her. The noblewoman and her maid were sitting in a cozy corner of the veranda at a table enjoying tea, and Lucilia, still a little stunned, turned to the maid with slight bewilderment, asking what exactly she was saying, because her thoughts remained scattered and unfocused. The maid expressed her concern, noticing that the mistress had seemed confused and preoccupied lately, as if something was bothering her, and she could not concentrate, as if she were experiencing some kind of inner turmoil. The lady, blushing with embarrassment, began to nervously wave her hands to the side when it was hinted to her that all this time her thoughts were absorbed by her husband, and she did not notice how her attention was completely focused only on him, ignoring everything else around. In the depths of her soul, the girl wondered if Davier Montefeltro had already arrived in the capital, feeling a slight uneasiness because the thought of his long journey did not give her peace, and she could not get rid of the anxiety that her wait might be prolonged. With impatience and slight excitement, she awaited the return of her wonderful husband, without whom she felt uncomfortable and even lonely, because her world seemed empty until he was around, and every absence of him was felt acutely. Suddenly, the lady's attention was drawn to the voice of a servant who suggested that she try something new from food, and although Lucilia was absorbed in her thoughts, this gesture embodied concern that reminded her that life does not stand still. With a warm and sincere smile on her face, she handed her mistress a cup of hot chocolate, feeling how every movement created an atmosphere of comfort, and the drink itself filled the space with warmth and a sense of care, giving harmony and peace. The noblewoman, looking at those present in the room, smiled because there was always warmth and support in her house, and remembering that next to her there were people ready to share everything that was happening, she felt deep gratitude for this harmony and comfort. She spent time with genuine pleasure over a cup of tea, laughing and talking bitterly, leaving all her worries behind because this moment was filled with simple but real happiness when you can just be close, enjoy the silence and communication. With a thumbs up and a sparkle in her eyes, Lucilia proudly said that she had named her new pet Debbie, feeling that the name chosen with such care perfectly reflected all the features of his character and appearance, giving him special meaning. The maid folded her hands together, laughed, and said that the pet's name was similar to the name of a duke because it sounded so majestic and refined, as if it belonged to a high-born aristocrat, and her laughter only added to the atmosphere of lightness and comfort. The cat, however, was outraged by such a comparison, and as soon as she heard it hissed, expressing her displeasure because she probably considered that her dignity was much higher than any comparison with the duke's, demonstrating her independence. A few days ago, the animal went outside, standing in the center of the yard and screaming for the rain to stop pouring because its constant noise and dampness frightened her mistress, and Debbie could not calmly watch how the weather was restlessly affecting her beloved owner. The pet moved his paws sideways, commanding the thunders to stop with a determined look, as if he had power over the heavens, and his graceful movements and confidence only emphasized how much he was attached to his sweet mistress. Suddenly, the pet froze in fear when the Duke unexpectedly appeared behind him, his steps confident and commanding, and the cat, sensing danger, froze tensely, feeling the approach of something important and inevitable, which could now change everything. Davide Montefeltro was walking straight towards the man, ignoring everything around him, when the cat, noticing him, gave a sharp growl, warning the intruder not to come near, and to leave immediately, as if she had some mysterious feeling that told her that he was not a friend. Suddenly, a blue magic seal appeared in the guy's hand, shining with a strange light, and its unusual glow immediately attracted the attention of the cat, who anxiously watched his every movement, as if knowing that this symbol carried something important and even dangerous. The same magical mark, as if it had come to life, suddenly became a collar on the cat's neck, and when she felt a cold touch, Debbie jerked in fear, trying to understand what was happening, and the mark gained its power, connecting her with mysterious forces. With a smile on his face, the Duke quickly realized that the pet lived with his bride in the Archduke's castle, and looking at the cat with interest, he felt how this unexpected incident was not an accident, but an unknown connection between their worlds. The pet was shocked to realize that Davide Montefeltro had come to understand him through magic, and was horrified by the aristocrat's powers, realizing that his life and freedom could now depend on his ability to hide his thoughts and feelings from this powerful man. Quite quickly, the nobleman also figured out that a ghost had entered the pet's body, which, despite its invisibility, was able to survive in this body, and its presence was not only mysterious for the hero, but also dangerous because such a combination could hide power. The man promised that he would not harm his bride since he did not have what he needed, and this confidence in his voice made the cat relax a little, but her wariness still remained because the nobleman's words could hide more serious intentions. The animal asked, confused, what exactly the cunning nobleman wanted, because her instincts told her that the answer was hidden somewhere between the words, and even if he promised not to harm her, inner feeling of anxiety did not leave. Having received no answer to her question, Debbie sat on her hostess's lap, thinking about the vile Duke, wondering what ulterior motives might lie behind his actions, and despite the seeming innocence of his promises, her heart could not rid itself of suspicion. The girl sitting in the chair suggested to the maid that it was time for them to go to a psychologist, because the one they were waiting for could help them sort out their feelings and thoughts, as well as establish inner peace and harmony in this difficult transition. Earlier, the nobleman had given the lady a tour of the castle and told her the history of the basics of etiquette, enthusiastically explaining how important details, even the smallest ones, are in the life of the aristocracy, and how important it is to follow these traditions in order to maintain a high position in society. And the guard helped her do leg exercises to regain her walking skills after a long time of rest, showing her how every movement was important to regain strength and confidence, and gradually returning her ability to move with confidence. The maid praised the lady, although she knew that it was difficult for her to make new friends, since her shyness and secrecy sometimes prevented her from establishing sincere and trusting relationships with others, but she still noticed how the lady tried to change herself. The lady decided that she would get back on her feet as quickly as possible and surprise her husband with her new abilities and what she had learned so quickly, because she was determined to return to her normal life to become strong and independent despite all the difficulties. On the table lay a white blank notebook and pencil case ready for drawing, as if inviting her to immerse herself in the creative process where every stroke and every movement was to become not only a way of self-expression, but also a therapeutic method for her recovery. The psychologist, on the contrary, suggested that the lady take up drawing in her free time, assuring her that this would not only help her relax, but also better understand her feelings, as well as establish a connection with her inner world, which she may not have listened to for a long time, absorbed in her worries. The man added that she could depict on paper whatever she wanted, because drawing opens up space for boundless imagination, and each image would reflect her thoughts and feelings, giving her the opportunity to express what was hidden inside. It would have been possible, for example, to draw the same cat that was in sight, because it is such simple moments and objects that can become inspiration for creativity, especially when everything around seems new and unusual, as in this case with drawing. The psychologist will come to her once a week, and then the lady will have to show him what she has drawn in order to discuss her successes and difficulties, and also to demonstrate how her inner state is reflected in her works and in the process of self-expression. Lucilia looked at the paper with fear because she had never done anything like this before and had no idea that it could be so difficult and unexpected. She was scared because every stroke on the paper now seemed important, and her uncertainty only increased her fear. Secretly, she hoped that she had this hidden talent because drawing seemed like something amazing that she could do to show her husband that she was not only his faithful companion, but also a woman capable of something more. Having decided but frowning, the girl firmly decided that she would surprise her husband with her skills, because despite all the doubts, she was ready to make an effort to master a new art and demonstrate that she was not afraid of new challenges. The cat sitting next to the lady laughed, saying that the lady clearly had talent because even her first attempts at drawing looked promising, although it was clear from Lucilia's face that this did not console her at all and could not make her relax. The drawing turned out to be so scary that it depicted a man and a cat, but they looked so realistic and creepy that it seemed as if they were about to come to life, and this terrified Lucilia, since she did not expect such a result at all. Lucilia was upset that she didn't get what she wanted so much, because despite all her efforts, the drawing turned out to be not what she imagined, and instead of pride came disappointment, which was hard to hide. Suddenly, Debbie ordered her mistress to get ready, because the butler was soon to arrive to show them the mansion, and she felt that she needed to be prepared for the important meeting, despite her own anxiety and nervousness about the upcoming event. Usually a butler stood out from other ordinary servants due to his status and qualifications, because his manners and knowledge of high society were always impressive, and he always knew how to behave properly while maintaining his importance in the eyes of the aristocracy. Surprised, Lucilia asked how the pet knew so much, as she did not expect his knowledge and intuition to be so accurate, as if he was a part of this world and not just her faithful friend, who for some reason understood much more than he should have. The pet hissed indignantly when he was compared to pompous aristocrats, because he could not stand such comparisons and believed that his place was not among arrogant people, but next to those who truly value sincerity and loyalty and not status and titles. But then the argument between the cat and the lady was interrupted by another voice. It was the man who called the lady, and his presence suddenly stopped the entire conversation, forcing the cat to fall silent, and Lucilia to become wary because she did not know who it was and what he wanted from them. Dietrich calmly asked the lady if she had interacted with her animal again, watching her reaction with interest as he was used to her unusual relationship with her pet, but was still a little surprised by how often she turned to him for advice. The lady winced as she noticed the remains of the wounds on the brave knight, not immediately realizing how serious his injuries were, because despite his resilience, she could feel the pain and fatigue beginning to show on his face. The woman's hand and the man's joined as the guard helped the lady to her feet, and there was something both strong and caring in that simple gesture which confirmed their mutual trust and willingness to support each other in difficult moments. Suddenly, Lucilia asked the guy if he was in trouble after her husband scolded him because she couldn't help but notice how his face changed slightly, and it was obvious that he was worried, despite his efforts to hide it. Dietrich led the lady into another room, ordering her not to worry about such trifles, assuring her that it did not matter, and that what was important was what was happening here and now, because they could enjoy the moment without being distracted by empty worries. The three of them together with the butler examined the mansion, walking through each corridor and room, admiring the majestic interiors and details, and with each step the lady increasingly felt how this house was filled with history which was kept within its walls. The butler enjoyed entertaining the lady, telling her the history of this house, its former owners, and the secrets that every corner hid, and Lucilia listened with interest, immersing herself in the atmosphere that he created with his stories. Finally they arrived, and the door began to open before the beauty, large and gold, as if welcoming her to this majestic place that was now to become her home, filled with history and new possibilities. The servant decided to first show the future Duchess the main corridor. It was spacious with soft carpets on the floor and paintings on the walls, creating an atmosphere of grandeur and ancient respect for traditions which so clearly filled every corner of this house. Paintings depicting previous generations of the family adorned the walls, and each portrait depicted a man with a proud posture, as if personifying the strength and greatness of the family, which remained unchanged through the centuries, leaving an indelible mark on history. The butler explained that it was worthwhile for the lady to know the Duke's ancestors, since she would soon become part of their family, because understanding their heritage would help her better understand what it meant to be part of this great dynasty and how important it was to preserve traditions and respect for the past. Lucilia was intrigued as to why all the people in the portraits looked so serious, because their faces expressed not only strength, but also some hidden heaviness, as if their looks held many stories and secrets that she could not yet unravel. Suddenly her gaze fell on the stone face of a snake with terrifying fangs, like a statue in which some ancient threat was hidden, something dark and powerful, as if the rock itself was possessed by the power that emanated from this monstrous figure. The girl shuddered. It seemed to her that the animal statue was looking straight at her as if it was coming to life, and her gaze met its eyes, which caused a feeling of uneasiness in her soul, as if this figure hid something more than just an ordinary stone. It turned out to be the coat of arms of the Davier Montefeltro family, a green snake, the symbol of their lineage with powerful fangs, which conveyed the strength and danger hidden in their origins, and which was now like an eternal witness part of this majestic setting. Suddenly, the butler pointed to the side, saying that the painting depicted the first Duke, and his figure was so imposing that it seemed as if he was ready to step out of the canvas to continue his life in this house, filling it with history. The man in the photo looked strict and elegant. His hair was carefully combed back, and his suit perfectly emphasized his strength and confidence, creating the image of a true aristocrat whose power and prestige seemed immutable beyond any doubt. He said that the Duke's ancestor was also the snake-headed god of myth, the founder of the country he owned and ruled the whole world, and this connection with a powerful deity gave the family special power and authority, personifying the strength and immortality of the family. The noblewoman was astonished to learn that one of the Duke's ancestors was a god who was called the Lord of Demons, and this revelation struck her imagination, for she could not imagine that her future husband could be connected with such mystical and sinister forces. Dietrich winced when the lady asked if Davier Montefeltro was a descendant of this deity, for the thought was both frightening and intriguing, and he, not knowing how to answer her, only fell silent, feeling how difficult it was to discuss such topics with a lady. The knight growled quietly but angrily at the butler, asking why he had told them about the demons, since such talk could only cause alarm and deprive them of any confidence that their world and relationship with this house remained pure. Together they began to convince the lady that these were just rumors, nothing more, because no one could say for sure what the truth was in these myths, and what was important was not to give in to these ancient fears, but to continue to look at reality with eyes filled with logic and common sense. The men stopped when they heard the maiden's answer that she did not think that Davier Montefeltro was like the evil archduke, and their eyes met because they did not expect such a comparison, which in their eyes seemed too far from reality. With sadness, Lucilia admitted that she still did not believe that she was able to escape from the villain and ended up in the house of her current husband because she experienced a lot of fear and anxiety until her life changed, and now her soul was tormented by gratitude but also anxiety. With her hand, the lady gently stroked the cat, which had settled on her lap, feeling how her nerves gradually calmed down from this simple but such an important gesture. The pet was not only a friend to her, but also a real source of comfort in moments of doubt. With a smile, Lucilia said that she did not think that her husband would be easy to deceive because she knew his willpower and insight, realizing that despite all her efforts, it was unlikely that he could be deceived if something was wrong. The men were pleased with these words and agreed that it would be difficult for the devil to deceive their master because he was too clever and determined to fall into a trap, and they felt proud of their master who always remained one step ahead. The beauty was surprised and delighted that at such a young age the guy became a duke, because his youth could not be combined with such an important role, and her heart was filled with respect and a slight trepidation at the thought of how quickly he reached such heights. The butler joyfully announced that it had happened 5 years ago and offered to show a photo of their master as a young man, for he was proud of how quickly his master had established himself in society and wanted to share this story with the lady who was just beginning to recognize him. They all stopped at the portrait and, without looking away, stared ahead, carefully studying the image as if trying to see in the eyes of the young duke his innermost thoughts and feelings hidden in this moment, captured on a canvas full of silent secrets. The noblewoman stopped in shock and opened her eyes wide in surprise because she did not expect that the young duke would look so attractive and aristocratic that his image would be remembered by her for a long time and at some point would make her think about many things. Young Davier Montefeltro was handsome and emotionless. His ice-blue eyes betrayed neither joy nor sadness, and his hair, black as night, gave him an unapproachable and mysterious appearance, forcing one to admire his grandeur and cold grace. Lucilia felt strange looking at the young husband in the painting because his cold and confident figure captured on the canvas seemed so distant and unattainable that she could not understand how her life could be connected with this man. The girl vaguely understood that if she had met such a husband in the past, she would hardly have dared to even speak to him, because his aristocratic posture and stern facial features inspired awe in her, making her feel insecure around him. Dietrich noted that Davier Montefeltro had been responsible for the entire duchy from a young age and had a great deal of responsibility on his shoulders, and although he was still young, he had already become a true leader who did not allow himself any weakness or doubts about his destiny. After which the knight added that the boy had always been alone without parents or other relatives, and this loneliness had hardened him, making him a strong and independent man who had learned to rely only on his own strength and not ask anyone for help. With sadness in her eyes, Lucilia realized that it must have been incredibly difficult for her husband to carry such a burden of responsibility on his shoulders, because from such a young age he had to take on fateful decisions that required enormous willpower and endurance. She gently leaned her hand against his portrait as if trying to feel his presence and read in his eyes what remained hidden from prying eyes, and at that moment it seemed to her that she could understand him much better. Then suddenly the butler said another important truth, that from the age of 13, Davier Montefeltro had participated in various military actions, and Lucilia felt how these words deeply shook her, revealing to her a completely new side of her husband's life. In another painting, a man with a malevolent look and pursed lips was depicted as her husband's father, and his face expressed sternness and coldness, which made Lucilia wonder how heavy an influence he had on his son's character. The noblewoman could not help but notice how much the men resembled each other, both father and son, and she was amazed at how the similarity in features and manners was passed down through generations, creating an almost inevitable and deep connection between them, as if something predestined. After this, the noblewoman read the inscription under the painting where the name of the Duke's father was indicated, and these words strengthened her confidence that she was in the house of not only aristocrats, but also representatives of a powerful family with a long and important history. The servants were surprised that Lucilia knew the alphabet and could read because they did not expect such knowledge from her, considering that the lady perhaps did not have time for education, paying attention only to secular manners and customs. They were impressed because they thought she didn't know anything about the curriculum, and this discovery surprised them because they expected to see a more superficial understanding of the world rather than signs of education and the ability to understand things that had previously seemed unfamiliar to them. Running her fingers over the tablet, the girl seemed to be immersed in memories from the past, feeling how each touch revives forgotten images and feelings that come alive again in her mind, even if her memory was partially erased by time. Debbie on her knees explained that although the memories were forgotten, they were not completely erased, and this remark reminded Lucilia that even the deepest experiences leave traces that can surface in the consciousness at the right moment. With a smile, the pet said that it was unlikely that his owner had been a fool as a child, because her intelligence and quick wits had always been at their best, and her kind-heartedness only hid these qualities, allowing her to be more naive than she actually was. The servants respectfully reasoned that perhaps if the maiden read more, her memory would become clearer, and forgotten moments from the past would begin to surface, since each new experience could awaken hidden knowledge and feelings. Without thinking twice, Lucilia agreed that she needed to practice more because she understood that only through constant effort and the desire for knowledge would she be able to regain what she had forgotten and achieve more than she ever expected. The chandelier sparkling in the center of the room illuminated the luxurious furniture decorated with exquisite patterns and expensive fabrics, creating an atmosphere of wealth and sophistication that literally captured the breath of everyone who entered this hall. The lady walked trembling across the room and asked the guest to wait a few minutes before entering, as she needed to prepare and compose herself, realizing how important this moment was for her and her future decisions. At this time, the cat, comfortably settled on the bed, yawned lazily, enjoying the moments of peace and quiet, as if not noticing all the fuss around, absorbed in her little world and the simple joys that life brought her. The maid, surprised, came inside, noticing her mistress sitting on the floor, her eyes expressing concern. She could not understand what had happened and why the lady was in such a position, not knowing what caused such fatigue and uncertainty. The maid hurried to her mistress, who was sitting on the floor, barely holding back her tears, because she was tired from long attempts to walk, and now finally feeling exhausted. She could not stand and fell, losing strength on this difficult journey. The woman asked the lady not to overwork herself and to rest from time to time, because she knew how important it was for her health to give herself a break in order to preserve her strength and not subject herself to excessive stress that could harm her condition. The woman's hand was extended forward and frozen in the air, as if in the moment when her gesture had no specific purpose. She was trying to stop time, calling for silence and attention, ready for the next action, which would be important. The maid turned around instantly when her mistress called her, ready to fulfill any request, because she always strived to be on top and did not allow herself to hesitate, especially when it came to satisfying the needs of the mistress. The aristocrat sitting on a chair asked where they got her clothes from, because there had been no other aristocrats in the mansion before, and she was intrigued as to how they managed to find such an outfit that seemed completely new for this place. Debbie tensed up, noticing the suspicious reaction of the maid, and the thought flashed through her eyes that perhaps the Duke had a mistress before, because her intuition told her that what was happening was not as harmless as it seemed at first glance. The maid wondered where to begin her story, putting her hand to her face as if trying to find the right words to explain the situation, but there was uncertainty in her eyes because everything she was about to say could change a lot. These outfits had previously belonged to the knight's sister, the one with red hair and an unusually beautiful appearance, and now on Lucilia they looked completely different, but still retained their exquisite style, reflecting the spirit of the past. Lucilia was surprised by such a confession and froze in shock, unable to immediately realize how many hidden secrets were connected with her new environment, because every word of the maid revealed new horizons that she had not yet had time to understand. The mansion was previously home to the previous Duke, her husband's father, and this discovery made Lucilia think again about the past and what traces this man left in this house, hiding many secrets and memories. The man was a generous man but headstrong, and despite all his achievements, there was an intransigence in his character which often caused conflicts with others, and his domineering nature did not allow him to listen to the opinions of others. 10 years after his wife's death, he decided to remarry and brought a new wife into the house, and she had a son who turned out to be the same age as Davier Montefeltro, which was an unexpected turn in the lives of their families. This boy turned out to be Dietrich, who was still a child at the time, and he was brought to a new home where he was completely absorbed in the new living conditions, adapting to new rules and encountering strangers. At that time, Dietrich was a handsome boy with gray eyes. His light hair and soft features gave him a surprising attractiveness, and his gentle, slightly frozen gaze left a mysterious impression on everyone who met him. It was a real surprise for the lady to learn that her husband, Davier Montefeltro, had a half-brother whom she did not know about because he had previously claimed that he had no relatives except himself, and this news violated all her ideas about his past. Lucilia noted that Davier Montefeltro often said that he had no relatives, and this unexpected information confused her because she could not understand how he could hide such an important fact about his family status. The young men then were brought up differently and were separated from each other for many years. Each of them grew up in their own environment, and their relationships with others, as well as with their families, were built differently. The maid jumped sharply when the lady suddenly asked what had happened to the knight's sister. This unexpected question opened up new horizons for her that she had not suspected, making her think about something that would have been much more difficult to say. The beauty came to the house with her brother, which was another unexpected event in the life of the lady, since before that she did not know about the existence of this connection, and now she had to learn more about the new faces in their house. But the former Duke acted unfairly towards his own son, not paying him due attention, while he gave his new adopted daughter expensive gifts and surrounded her with care, which further depressed the calm Davier. Davier Montefeltro found himself neglected and alone. His parents did not take care of him properly, and he felt emptiness and loneliness creeping into his life, leaving him in despair. Davier Montefeltro went to war because he was not welcome at home, and in search of purpose and consolation, he decided to take this step because only in distant lands could he find what he was looking for: recognition and the opportunity to prove himself. At this time, the previous Duke, his father, was having fun wasting money on empty pleasures and not caring about his son, who, despite his youth, already felt how hard it was to be part of such a family where indifference and great egoism reigned. But when the lady's husband was 16 years old, his father, a former Duke, died unexpectedly, and this tragic event radically changed his whole life, putting him before the need to make the most important decisions that were to determine the future. Lucilia looked down sadly when she learned that at a young age, Davier Montefeltro was left completely alone without a family. All his loved ones abandoned him, leaving him alone with difficult experiences and loneliness which deeply shocked her. The girl nervously tugged at the hem of her dress sleeve, with her hand trying to calm the storm in her thoughts, but her face clearly showed great concern. A woman's heart was yearning, trying to understand how her husband was coping with the fact that he was hiding a secret past. The maid asked her mistress with tender concern whether she should worry, but then hastened to add that there was no reason for that because everything was fine, and at the moment there were no situations that could worry her. Dresses for ladies were temporary, and she would soon be ordered a new wardrobe that would better suit her status and style. But Lucilia at that moment was thinking about something completely different. Not about her appearance, but about what was going on in her husband's soul. Lucilia was not worried about the need to update her wardrobe or about the dress, but about the hidden feelings that her husband was experiencing deep inside. She could not understand how to help him cope with these internal experiences, which only aggravated the anxiety. Davier must have felt extremely lonely and depressed as a child when his father brought a new wife into the house and completely forgot about him not paying attention to his son's needs and feelings, leaving him alone with bitterness and loneliness. The maid, noticing that the women had left and abandoned their master after the death of the previous duke, began to angrily slander them, accusing them of irresponsibility and cruelty, although she herself could not know all the circumstances. Clutching a fragile cup in her hands, the sweet woman was ready to start arguing with the girls, who in her opinion had dumped all the responsibility on the knight, as if she did not understand that sometimes the fate of life itself throws us difficult tests. As the maid suddenly froze in shock, Lucilia suddenly said good-naturedly that she was glad that they had such a good duke as Davier, that her words were somewhat embarrassing because no one expected such sincere praise from the lovely lady. The maid began to tell about the childhood of their master and guard, about how they went through trials together, and Lucilia could not help but laugh, finding in the story such moments that seemed to her surprisingly touching and almost comical. However, Lucilia was worried about what would happen if the knight's sister returned and took her husband's hand, because she couldn't help but think that she might not be prepared for such a turn of events, as if it was inevitable. A few days passed, and Lucilia decided to go for a walk with her maid and knight in search of fresh air and peace, to refresh her thoughts and enjoy the silence even for a few hours. The cat, watching her mistress, made fun of her, saying that she now walked as if on her paws, which was a little funny because Debbie herself rarely showed such behavior, but here she seemed to even manage to make fun of the lady. Suddenly they stopped, and turning back warily, heard strange sounds that disturbed the silence and tranquility of the surrounding environment, after which they listened tensely, trying to determine the source to make sure that they were safe. The lady smiled and complimented the guard who stood behind her when he said that her mistress's cat growled constantly like a dog, which attracted attention and caused surprise because even cats can show unexpected reactions. Dietrich turned away shyly, covering his face with his hand, as if he wanted to hide from view because he was embarrassed that his reaction had attracted attention, and he did not know how to react to such an unexpected turn of events. The maid who was walking with them expressed surprise, as she had not supposed that the mistress could like Dietrich, which caused the guard to give an indignant cry, as if he was struck by this revelation and could not contain his emotions. The noblewoman couldn't help but laugh when she heard such a reaction from her friends, because their behavior was so sweet and innocent that she couldn't help but smile, enjoying the atmosphere of lightness and carefree playfulness that reigned around. The mansion in front of them was striking in its beauty. Blue sky, majestic towers, refined architecture, as if it were a work of art in itself, where every detail harmoniously fit into the surrounding landscape. The people who served the Duke were truly worthy. Their respect for the house and the owner was visible in their every movement, in their every smile, creating an atmosphere of trust and mutual understanding that reigned within the walls of this mansion. And most importantly, the presence of a person like Davier was incredibly valuable. Not only did he look great, but he was also kind and noble inside, which made him even more attractive and warm-hearted in the eyes of others. The blue sky, bright sun, and green expanses of trees created an atmosphere of comfort and peace, as if nature itself supported Lucilia in her feminine decision, inspiring her to take new steps and giving her strength for the upcoming challenges. Suddenly, the noblewoman stopped, looked resolutely, and firmly declared that today she would definitely get up on her feet and walk on her own, leaving the wheelchair behind, deciding to prove to herself and everyone around her her unbroken willpower and fortitude. Lucilia stood up on trembling legs. Her body resisted, but despite the pain and weakness, she took several confident steps forward, feeling how each movement required effort but gave hope for recovery. It was incredibly difficult for her legs to support the entire weight of her body, but Lucilia, gritting her teeth and overcoming the pain, stubbornly walked forward, not allowing herself to give up, feeling how each step she took brought her closer to complete independence. The girl shouted sharply to her friends, asking them to be quieter and stop trying to persuade her to return to her chair, because she was determined to be independent, when suddenly another guest joined them, who obviously did not expect to hear such an order. It was Davier, who greeted his wife with a slight smile, asking if she had managed to adopt her cat's habits during his absence, since his long absence could not help but affect her behavior and mood. The horse-drawn carriage slowly rolled along the road, driven by an experienced coachman who carefully watched every movement of the animals so that they did not go astray and delivered their passengers to the right place. The Duke sat inside the carriage, looking thoughtfully out the window, lost in his thoughts, quietly thinking about how they would soon reach their destination and what awaited him ahead, but he was not sure that he was ready for what awaited him. The Emperor's castle was luxuriously furnished. Gilded birds decorated the walls, and red curtains added a special sense of royal grandeur to the interior, as if the whole furnishings were created to emphasize the power and status of its owner. The Duke, entering the castle, paused for a moment in front of the throne, as if assessing the atmosphere, and then accepted the marriage proposal that came from the imperial family, despite the complexity and importance of such a decision. The ruler offered the man his daughter named Margarita, who was only 19 years old, but Davier, without hesitation, resolutely refused this offer clearly and firmly, stating that he did not intend to take her as a wife despite all the pressure. The Emperor was deeply surprised by the nobleman's decision, not expecting such a turn of events, and trying to understand the reasons again offered him his daughter, but the nobleman firmly repeated that he did not intend to link his fate with her daughter. He already had a fiancée, a beautiful girl with golden hair and green eyes, reminiscent of fresh grass, and despite all the persuasion and proposals, he was not ready to change his feelings for the sake of a new connection, remaining true to his choice. The Emperor was shocked by this news, since he sincerely believed that all the rumors about the betrayal of the aristocrat were just fiction, having no basis in reality, but now he was forced to admit the cruel truth. The angry man clenched his fist tightly, feeling his heart fill with anger and disappointment because he never expected to be denied such an important matter, which seemed to be the key to resolving the conflict and restoring lost hopes. Now that the sinister Archduke has disappeared, there is only one man left who can support the imperial family and maintain power in a society that is losing all stability and is in dire need of a new leader to restore order. And that man was Davier, who, not being afraid to personally destroy the evil tyrant without thinking about the consequences, demonstrated determination and courage, thereby earning respect and recognition for his brave actions. It was he who proved worthy of taking the place of the emperor's son-in-law, and also received the privilege of wearing the crown on his head, which became a symbol of a new stage in the history of the empire, when a man with unbending willpower and determination sat on the throne. With a smile on his face, Davier reminded the ruler of his own words about the right to do whatever he wanted with the former prisoner, forcing him to feel the full weight of his own frivolity and thoughtlessness. Moreover, Lucilia had a value that could not be measured by either money or power, and this attracted the ruler's keen interest in her, making him wonder why such loud and weighty words were addressed to him, causing him doubts. With a slight grin, the boy finished his speech, emphasizing that his future wife and duchess was called Lucilia, and advised the emperor to remember this as best as possible, for she would take an important place in the history of the empire. Now in his carriage, the Duke, heading home, thought about the emperor's proposal, and smiling to himself thought that he would never carry out his orders like a faithful dog, ready to obey without question. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the bride, who was walking surrounded by her servants, and this sight caught his attention, reminding him how quickly circumstances change and how important it is to maintain control over one's own destiny. Knocking on the carriage door, Davier asked the driver to stop the vehicle right there, not wanting to go any further, and feeling that this was the moment when he had to act, without wasting a second to complete his business. And so after a long separation, he met a girl who was able to conquer his heart. They caught each other on the spot like two statues, and only a light wind playing with their hair interrupted the moment of silence and tense anticipation. The girl looked at her husband in surprise, not expecting him to arrive so soon, because she was sure that he would still have a lot to do, and that his sudden appearance was a complete surprise to her, disturbing her peace. Davier, with a slight smile on his face, joked, asking if she really found his company so unpleasant, and if she preferred to communicate with a cat, because it was clear that her attitude towards his presence was much colder than expected. The woman's legs ran forward quickly when she felt that she needed to leave. Her steps were determined, and a feeling flared up in her soul that the time had come to act, because she could not stay in one place at this moment. The girl, trying to hug her husband, suddenly stumbled and, clumsily losing her balance, began to fall, but at the last moment she felt the support of strong arms that kept her from falling. The Duke, with care, supporting his beloved, hugged her tightly, asking her not to rush because he understood perfectly well that she needed a little time to recover from her fall and regain confidence in her abilities. With a smile on his lips, Davier listened with keen interest to what his lady had learned during his absence, and was surprised to note that she had been able to learn to walk on her own, which filled his heart with immense joy and pride for her perseverance and willpower. The noblewoman's legs were slightly trembling from fatigue, but she continued to try to maintain her balance with a strong inner desire, as if not wanting to reveal her weakness and uncertainty, showing everyone her true fortitude and determination to overcome difficulties. Seeing that the beauty was tired of walking, Davier, without thinking twice, picked up his wife in his arms carefully and tenderly hugging her, because he knew that now she needed more than just words of support. She needed his help. The nobleman, smiling, made fun of the aristocrat, saying that she must have managed to run, while the others turned away and her quick steps disappeared at the moment when everyone was absorbed in their own affairs, but he was glad that she was nearby. Lucilia looked down in embarrassment and quietly said that she was probably able to get up and walk because she was immensely happy about her husband's return, and this happiness gave her strength, despite the fatigue and worries that still did not leave her. After these words, Davier carefully carried his bride back to the castle, where the servants were already eagerly awaiting them, ready to offer their help and care, because the return was an important event for the entire imperial family, symbolizing the beginning of a new stage. The Duke studied the documents in his office, concentrating on every word, his lips pressed tightly together as he realized how important every decision and every line he had to evaluate and make was. The men standing nearby exchanged many whispers, indicating that the master's order would require additional time to be carried out, so that everything could be done with due care, considering the importance of every detail and the need for full attention to the process. Davier, pushing aside the papers, stated with irritation and anger that apparently the other person did not understand what he was talking about and was so stupid that he did not realize the importance of the situation, expressing his dissatisfaction with the other person's complete helplessness. After these words, the aristocrat ordered his companion to leave immediately if he was going to anger him further, because Davier's nerves were already at their limit, and he was not ready to tolerate further provocations and disturbances on his part. The Duke ended up alone with the therapist, and feeling the tension building, he talked about his successes in his relationship with his wife, trying to find understanding and support to improve his inner experiences. Davier carefully picked up the drawing he had brought with him and said that his purpose was to show the drawing to the aristocrat, hoping that he would be able to appreciate its meaning and understand his inner experiences through the drawing. Davier, with a look of concentration on his face, stared at the paper brought to him curiously, beginning to carefully examine the image, trying to understand its meaning and understand what exactly was hidden behind this image. The drawing depicted a girl and a wolf sitting at a table on which someone's head was lying in a plate, which immediately caused a feeling of alarm and horror in the man, because the scene was not only unusually gloomy, but also frightening in its ominous atmosphere. The man quickly realized that this drawing was created by his wife, and focusing on every detail, began to examine the painting more closely, trying to understand what she wanted to express through such an unusual image. The therapist hesitated, trying to find the right words to explain the meaning of such a strange drawing, because its meaning was not obvious, and he did not know how best to interpret these symbols to understand Davier. The wolf in the picture symbolized one of the famous aristocratic families, and the food depicted next to it expressed the fear that the lady felt since she had previously lost her memories and could not clearly understand what was happening around her. It was surprising that Lucilia, who had previously been imprisoned, was able to recognize this symbol of a noble family and moreover did not feel fear of it despite her difficult past and experiences associated with memory loss. Davier expressed gratitude to his servant for his help, realizing how important it was to understand the meaning of the drawing, and ordered him to bring him all new drawings of his wife, so that he could understand her thoughts and experiences through these symbols. The psychotherapist agreed to follow the master's order and continue sessions with the lady, realizing how important it was to understand her condition more deeply in order to help her cope with her inner experiences and restore her lost balance. On the way out, the man bumped into the butler and walked past without stopping as the servants entered, continuing to carry out their duties as if nothing had happened, ignoring the meeting with the psychotherapist. Standing before his master, the servant asked him if his curiosity had been satisfied, to which he replied that by and large, yes, since he had been able to get answers to his questions, although there was still much that required further thought. After this, Davier handed the bride's drawing to the butler, who examined it carefully, and having assessed her talent, noted that her work deserved attention and could tell a lot about her inner world and artistic perception of reality. The servant frowned then, with a wary look, asked his master whether the reason for the lady's appearance in their house was connected with the very curse that seemed to haunt the family and bring trouble from generation to generation. There was indeed a curse in the Montefeltro family, like a snake that wrapped itself around every member, and it was so ancient that its effects were felt even in the most remote corners of their lineage despite time and distance. Long ago, their ancestor, who was a snake god, committed a terrible sin by entering into an unholy union with a man, which brought a terrible curse that became an integral part of their lineage and affected many generations. As a result of this curse, the tree of their power and magic was doomed to fall, and the members of the Montefeltro family could not escape its heavy influence, which like an ominous shadow haunted them, giving them no peace for centuries. As a result, each member of the family was doomed to immeasurable suffering, because the stronger their magical abilities were, the more pain they experienced in their lives, and this curse accompanied them throughout their entire lives. The serpent god, before leaving this world, sowed his seeds all over the earth, spreading his dark influence and curse on all living things he met along the way, creating unimaginable suffering for future generations. In those moments when the pain subsided, little family members could easily fall in love, but soon this feeling turned into a loss of reason, because in their hearts it was not love that burned, but an ominous force that destroyed their minds and distorted their perception of the world. The butler, with obvious excitement on his face, asked whether the gentleman had brought Madame here, since, according to his information, she possessed the ancient and dangerous power of Lilith, which could have a serious influence on current events and the destinies of people. Montefeltro, without speaking, merely nodded, which meant his tacit consent, and this silence was no less expressive than words, as a confirmation that he was ready to accept the consequences of his actions. The man turned his head and said that there was also another reason why the presence of such an ancient power made him suspicious, because the power itself, which had remained hidden for so long, was too dangerous and opaque. The girl from the dungeon had previously claimed that she did not know the alphabet, but despite this, she was able to read her husband's name, which was even more confusing because her ability seemed unexpected and strange to everyone who was nearby, causing doubts and surprise. Although the beauty could not walk upon seeing her lover, she, as if by magic, stood up on her feet and rushed to him, overcoming pain and fatigue, because her love was stronger than any limitations imposed by her weakness. Tapping his finger on the drawing, the Duke said that before girls were sent to him for the purpose of marriage, but he knew that these were only intrigues of those who possess the power of Lilith, seeking to use him and not give real feelings. However, Lucilia was completely different, innocent, sweet, and mysterious, as if nature itself had created her in such a way that her presence seemed harmonious and true, unlike the others whose intentions were shrouded in mystery and suspicion. The Duke sitting in his office stated that he had certain guesses but he was not yet sure of their truth, feeling that his intuition was telling him something important, but he needed more time to understand everything. The butler, upset and a little embarrassed, admitted that he did not quite understand what the gentleman expected of him, but despite this he promised that he would not play with the bride's feelings, wanting only honesty and respect for her experiences. The girl was not supposed to be sad. On the contrary, she was supposed to laugh, enjoy life, and be happy, because her future, in theory, was supposed to be filled with bright moments and not with bitterness and regrets about the past. Unperturbed, without the slightest hesitation, the man added that despite everything he would like to see her cry, experience other emotions, because all feelings, be it joy or pain, were important for understanding her true state and soul. After which Montefeltro, with a slight smile, returned his gaze to his wife's drawing, realizing that despite all her oddities, she had managed to intrigue him, awakening an interest that he could not ignore, despite his suspicions. Lucilia, lying on the bed, thoughtfully wondered why her husband had been talking to the therapist for so long, trying to understand what was behind his silence and strange behavior, not knowing what thoughts were tormenting him. Debbie, sitting next to Lucilia, unable to bear her anxiety, rudely told her to calm down, and sit quietly, as if her patience was at its limit, and every emotion of her mistress became an extra burden for her. Lucilia was angry at her pet's harsh words, her face distorted with displeasure, and she winced, not expecting that even her faithful companion would so rudely point out her worries and anxiety, not realizing that she was also having a hard time. Suddenly the door swung open, and a man entered the room, his appearance breaking the silence and the attention of everyone in the room, because his presence immediately attracted attention, as if this moment was decisive for the development of events. It was the Duke who, seeing that his bride was about to fall again, deftly caught her, keeping her from falling, for she was so clumsy and lost in her movements that it was difficult for her even to stand on her feet. The beauty stopped, her face flushed with surprise when she learned that her husband had prepared a gift for her, and her eyes reflected both joy and slight embarrassment from such a surprise. Montefeltro smiled, looking at his bride, and with a slight hint of pride in his voice, said that this gift was a reward for her patience and fidelity, because she waited for it, overcoming all the difficulties and uncertainties of their path without losing faith in the future. The man's and woman's hands clasped in a tight embrace, expressing silent agreement and a deep connection that united them despite all the trials, difficulties, and doubts that sometimes overwhelmed their lives, filling their hearts with mutual understanding. The gift was an elegant bracelet with precious beads that shimmered in the light, which was not only a beautiful decoration, but also symbolized the feelings and gratitude that Montefeltro had for his bride. A pleased Davier asked with a slight smile if his wife liked the gift, carefully watching her reaction and expecting to see sincere joy and gratitude in her eyes, because he wanted his attention and care for her feelings to be appreciated. The girl, looking at the decoration in surprise, did not hide her delight. Her eyes shone with admiration, and the smile that appeared on her face was sincere and touched, because such a gift was a real surprise for her. To the girl herself, who had only recently begun to understand the true value of expensive things, this bracelet seemed almost magical, because she had learned the price of such items in one of her etiquette lessons, and now she understood that it was valuable and significant. With a smile, the beauty told her husband that she really liked the gift, not hiding her delight and gratitude for such a wonderful gesture of attention, which was not only beautiful, but also touching in its sincerity. Almost laughing, the man said that the lady clearly had a keen eye for jewelry, noticing the interest with which she looked at the bracelet, and jokingly noted her ability to recognize value and sophistication even in the most expensive jewelry. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed down the hallway as someone announced with surprise that the bracelet was incredibly expensive, and that its price contained not only the glitter of the jewelry, but also a whole history of sophistication and luxury. The maiden froze in horror when she heard the price of the diamonds that adorned the bracelet. Her eyes widened in surprise and shock, because for her this cost was a stunning revelation, and she did not expect that the gift would be so expensive. The embarrassed aristocrat learned that the bracelet was chosen precisely because of the emerald, which perfectly matched the color of her eyes, and at that moment she felt special, realizing that this gift was not random but thought out to the smallest detail. Lucilia promised to treasure the gift as a symbol of her husband's care and attention, and her words were spoken with such genuine respect for the piece of jewelry that they reflected the depth of her gratitude for such a valuable item. The man stopped in shock when hearing his wife's question about whether there were other jewels of the same blue color. He was momentarily confused because he himself did not expect that she would be so interested in his choice. But soon an understanding smile appeared on his lips. With that slight smile on his lips, the nobleman responded with agreement, realizing that his wife was truly interested in the details, and her question was not just about jewelry, but about her desire to understand the true meaning and care hidden behind each gift. Davier kissed his wife's hand and promised that next time he would give her a blue diamond, assuring her that this gift would be even more special than the previous one, because he was ready to do everything for her to make her feel like a queen. The handsome man joked with a slight smile that he hopes that the day will soon come when Lucilia will look graceful and beautiful, and they will be able to attend a social event together where she will become a real star and all eyes will be focused only on her. The next day, a loud cry of surprise was heard throughout the castle when everyone learned that the long-awaited holiday was about to begin, and the anticipation of this event filled everyone's hearts because this day promised to be truly unforgettable. The lady sat on a chair listening attentively to the butler who was enthusiastically telling her about the upcoming festival that was soon to take place, and her gaze was focused on his words because this holiday promised to be an important event. The maiden's head spun at this news, for she realized what it meant. She would be presented for the first time at a social event as the Duke's wife, and her heart was filled with excitement and touching pride in her new role in society. She leaned over with interest and asked the servant what exactly would happen at the celebration and what it was being held in honor of, because she was curious to learn the details of such an important event, which seemed to have special significance for everyone. Under such an impression, she learned that it was on this day, according to legend, that the snake god arrived on earth and blessed all people, and this was the reason for a large-scale celebration that symbolized the harmony and power of the ancient gods. During the day, a sumptuous banquet was held at the castle to which all the aristocrats were invited, and the atmosphere was filled with social splendor and enthusiastic conversation as people exchanged news and enjoyed a magnificent meal. In the evening, the Duke, riding around his entire territory, congratulated local citizens with a smile, meeting them on the streets and conveying words of gratitude for their support and loyalty, making this day even more significant for every inhabitant of his lands. The lady froze in horror, realizing that on this day she would have to meet not only aristocrats but also ordinary people, and a feeling of impending excitement took hold of her because she did not know how to behave correctly among such a motley company. The beauty was in tears from fear of the upcoming event, because she was afraid of appearing stupid or awkward, not knowing how to cope with the tension and high expectations that were placed before her, and the pressure that was increasing with each passing moment. The servants rushed to reassure their mistress, assuring her that she had had enough time to prepare, and they would be there to help her look dignified and confident at this important event, promising to support her at every step. Moreover, the Duke usually sat in his office and skipped the banquet, preferring to deal with important matters and make decisions that required his attention instead of enjoying the social event. In addition, he avoided communicating with ordinary citizens about the preparations for the procession, since it was obvious to him that nobles and aristocrats should pay more attention to such events than ordinary citizens whose participation was not so significant. The woman's hand clutched the hem of her dress, overcome with nervous emotion, because this moment was so important to her that every movement and every word had to be carefully thought out so as not to spoil the impression and not make a mistake at the decisive moment. For the first time since her arrival here, the beauty realized that this day would be her official appearance in society, accompanied by her husband, and now she had to demonstrate her role in society as a worthy wife of the famous and handsome Duke. Together with him, they had to appear before society, officially declaring their marriage, and this appearance in society became for her a symbol of a new stage in life where her every word and action would be assessed by those around her. Pursing her lips, the lady sternly told herself that she needed to succeed and show herself from the best side, because this moment was important not only for her, but also for her husband's reputation and their place in aristocratic society. The servants shuddered and immediately turned their attention to the lady, realizing that the time had come to help her master etiquette and manners as soon as possible so that she could feel confident at the upcoming important event without losing her composure. Lucilia was determined to make her man proud of her, and she was determined to succeed, despite all her doubts and worries, as she was willing to put forth every effort to earn her husband's respect. She strove to become worthy of the Duke, to be the same support for him as he was for her, wanting to build a relationship that would be based on mutual respect, trust, and a willingness to support each other in life's trials. Together they will look like a beautiful couple, waving proudly to greet the citizens, and their image will symbolize strength and unity, attracting admiring glances from everyone around who will be proud of such a noble union. Davier will smile at her, and perhaps one day he will open up to her for real, making her a part of his life, and his thoughts allowing him to feel that she is not just his wife, but a true partner to whom he can trust his feelings. The servants were amazed by such words, and understanding the importance of the upcoming event, began to advise the lady to find a new dress as soon as possible, choose jewelry, and also learn dancing and manners so as not to miss the chance to shine at the banquet. The hands carefully held the measuring tape, gently wrapping it around the noblewoman's slender waist, measuring every centimeter with such care as if not only her external beauty, but also her inner self-confidence. Her sense of harmony depended on these details. Soon the maid said with a smile that everything was ready to sew a new dress for the noblewoman, because now all that was left was to choose the fabric and shape that would emphasize her exquisite taste and status. The girl looked lovely. A pink bow adorned her hair, and a delicate blue dress combined with a sophisticated necklace on her neck made her look truly captivating, as if she were the embodiment of spring freshness and grace. The man who sewed the dresses knelt down and began to carefully adjust the aristocrat's outfit, carefully adjusting every detail so that the dress would fit perfectly, emphasizing her refined figure and impeccable taste. With a wave of his hand, the salesman also offered the lady other dresses that might suit her and appeal to her, emphasizing the variety of models, each of which could not only emphasize her style, but also reveal her individuality in the most favorable light. The next day, after a long conversation between the beauty and the servants, many models of dresses were brought to her, which were eagerly waiting for their turn to be tried on to help her choose exactly what would make her image even more impeccable. The servants began to teach her how to eat, properly read books, and studied manners, doing everything possible so that she could feel confident and elegant at any event, and her behavior reflected true nobility. Lucilia continued to study hard signing documents and absorbing knowledge, striving to improve her skills every day, realizing that there was no barrier to her desire to become a worthy wife and aristocrat. And now the girl was called to help choose the right outfit for the upcoming holiday, and pick out jewelry that would highlight her natural beauty and style, because this day was an important step in her social life. As soon as she heard the guy's other voice, her attention was instantly drawn to his remark about an unusual and interesting detail in her image, and she immediately became interested, looking at herself from a new angle. The guy, who turned out to be the salesman, explained with a friendly smile that the lady's shoes, despite their unique style and individuality, turned out to be exactly the same size as the shoes belonging to the girl who once lived in the house and left her mark. But suddenly the guy's conversation was interrupted by a loud bang that broke the fragile silence, leaving everyone amazed and confused about what could have been the compelling reason for such an unexpected and strange sound. The maid, with a slight and slightly ironic smile on her face, suggested stopping the conversation and concentrating on choosing a dress, since there was very little time left to make a decision, and every minute was worth its weight in gold. Lucilia quickly realized that the conversation had turned to the knight's sister, whom the servants preferred not to mention, despite the obvious importance of her person, and this made her wary, giving rise to a feeling of curiosity and mystery that became increasingly disturbing. The elegant blue shoes with their graceful heels perfectly matched the noblewoman's image, emphasizing her refined taste and sophistication, giving her gait lightness and grace as if she were walking on clouds. Her beauty was so striking that she seemed to have stepped straight out of a painting like a real princess, and her radiant presence bewitched everyone who saw her, attracting the attention of everyone around her like a magnet. Next to the noblewoman, as if as her faithful companion, was a cat who, without stopping, watched her mistress's outfit, evaluating it with her inherent grace and independence, as if she had her own opinion. The animal, hissing indignantly, as if expressing complete dissatisfaction, loudly declared that it would in no way like to be at this banquet, considering noisy events and crowded gatherings unnecessary and even a little irritating for its peaceful existence. The pet did not want to attend the celebration at all, and refused in every way to go with its owner, demonstrating obvious discontent and alienation from the upcoming event, as if this noisy gathering was completely alien to it. Just as their conversation was in full swing, the lady's conversation with her pet was suddenly interrupted by a strange voice that suddenly came from behind them, causing both to turn sharply and pay attention with interest to the source of this unexpected intervention. Sir Dietrich stood before them, and with a slight smile and a polite tone, he asked whether the beauty had forgotten her previous training, and whether she still continued to practice the art of walking in high heels. The man, with a slight smile on his face, reminded the lady that in addition to regular practice, she also needed to remember to rest and give herself a break from time to time, because only in harmony between work and rest could one achieve true mastery. Suddenly, the man froze in place. His face turned pale, and he froze as if he had seen a ghost. His gaze became anxious and confused, and his body seemed motionless, unable to move from the place from shock and deep surprise. In this elegant dress, Lucilia reminded Dietrich strikingly of his sister, whom he missed so often, and her image instantly brought him back to those distant days when life seemed simpler and brighter, and the heart was full of hope. At that moment his thoughts were interrupted by the caring and quiet speech of a lady who, noticing his condition, asked if everything was okay with him, and her voice, like a cold shower, helped him return to reality, interrupting the flow of thoughts. Only now did the noblewoman realize that her presence was causing pain to the guard, bringing back his memories of the past, of something distant and long forgotten, which now brought only the bitterness of loss and the shadows of unresolved feelings. Lucilia felt a heavy feeling of sadness and anxiety wash over her, as all eyes were on her, and she realized that those around her were seeing her as something other than who she really was, creating images that did not correspond to reality. Now Dietrich could not hide his alarm, noticing how the lady turned pale, and his expression became serious, as he was clearly worried about her well-being, worried about what could have caused her condition. Lucilia, trying to calm him down and hide her inner anxiety, waved him off with a slight gesture, assuring him that she was fine, adding that she was just tired and needed a little rest, although in reality her anxiety was deeper than she let on. The couple decided to go for a walk in the garden, where nature was revealed in all its glory: majestic trees, green plants, flowering flower beds. All this was created to give peace and enjoyment from the peaceful surroundings. The noblewoman was completely delighted with the picturesque nature. Her gaze could not be satiated with the beauty of the surrounding landscape. Green spaces, bright flowers, and shadows of trees which smoothly flowed into the endless expanses of the garden seemed to her a real work of art. The majestic mansion, with large gardens where exotic plants and shrubs grow and labyrinths of greenery attract curious guests, created an atmosphere of mystery and privacy, as if the garden itself kept many secrets and mysteries of the past. The knight bowed and respectfully explained that he had decided that the beauty of the garden and its harmony could lift the lady's spirits, because in such a picturesque place surrounded by a natural idol, one could forget about worries and find peace of mind. The aristocrat shuddered when she learned that this picturesque place had dangerous areas that one should not walk alone, because even the most beautiful corner of the garden could conceal an unexpected threat, especially for those who are not familiar with its features. The woman's leg took a confident step forward, as if wanting to check whether these dangerous areas were really so scary, or on the contrary she could go around them and continue enjoying the walk, ignoring the warnings. The knight's eyes widened in surprise and fear when he noticed the guest who had suddenly appeared in the garden without an invitation. His face turned pale, and he froze in place, overcome with horror, not understanding what exactly had brought this man to their secluded place. The girl with fiery red hair greeted her old acquaintance affectionately, tenderly calling him brother by name, her voice sounding warm like a greeting that brings a long-awaited meeting, filling the atmosphere with coziness and joy. It was his beautiful sister with long, silky hair and bright golden eyes that sparkled like the sun's rays at dawn. Her beauty was indescribable, like a flower blooming in the morning dew, delicate and attractive. The girl approached the young couple, stood in front of them with a graceful posture and smiled. Her expression was polite and warm, as if she was sincerely happy to see them, but there was a slight mystery hidden in her gaze, which only increased her charm. Lucilia was shocked to see the knight's family, who had long disappeared from his life, suddenly reappearing as if from the past, reminding him that it can be difficult to leave behind even the oldest and most forgotten memories. Dietrich, however, did not share her surprise and was clearly not pleased to see his sister. His face darkened with irritation, and he asked rudely why she had come there, as if he did not want her presence to disturb his peace and plans. The lady explained in a reserved but confident manner that she was an invited guest at the banquet, and therefore had every right to be present in that place, as did anyone else who was among the guests at that event, without seeing any reason for dissatisfaction. Her hand gently touched the scarlet rose, and each petal seemed to respond to her touch, giving the moment a special softness, as if nature itself was reacting to her movement, as if it were part of some secret ritual. Thoughtfully turning her gaze to the side, Asta quietly said that she had heard rumors that Davier, who seemed so secluded and mysterious, had finally found himself a bride, and this news caused a strange combination of curiosity and slight anxiety in her heart. Lucilia froze awkwardly when she was called cute, because this compliment sounded somehow insincere, almost mocking, and she felt something inside her skip a beat in bewilderment, as if the words were just a formality hiding a hidden mockery. The cat nearby also did not like the behavior of the knight's sister. She behaved unceremoniously and rudely, as if not noticing that her manners could leave an unpleasant mark on the relationship, but she continued to ignore everything around her, as if not realizing her behavior. There was a strange feeling around this girl, as if someone was trying to make a ghost out of her, a cold presence as if she were just a shadow of someone else, but the reason for this feeling remained unclear and left behind a feeling of anxiety. Lucilia felt uncomfortable, and for a moment it seemed to her that she had taken someone else's place, as if she wasn't supposed to be there, and this feeling made her nervous, as if she had accidentally ended up in a reality that was alien to her. Asta, noticing her brother's expression that had suddenly become strange and tense, suddenly spoke up, asking him why his face looked so worried and surprised, as if he had seen something that had greatly shocked him and made him think. With a mocking smile and slight contempt, the lady standing before her interlocutor said that he looked as if he had just committed some misdemeanor that could not go unnoticed, and his attempts to hide it were obvious and unconvincing. Suddenly Asta, holding back tears, broke down and cried, feeling like a complete fool when she admitted that she had previously believed in baseless hopes, because as it turned out Dietrich was connected with that terrible person who was not worth relying on. The girl, seized with panic, quickly rushed into flight, and the knight, not wanting to lose her, immediately rushed in pursuit, ready to overcome any obstacles so as not to lose sight of the one who was so important to him. The man, with obvious anxiety in his voice, insistently asked the lady to stay and not leave him, assuring her that he would soon return and that her wait would not be long, although he himself could not say exactly how long it would take him to return. Left alone, the girl felt completely lost, not having the slightest idea where she was or how long she would have to wait for her companion to return, who would probably return with a cat in his arms. A lot of time passed, but no one came, and Lucilia finally realized that perhaps she should act on her own to get out of the tangled labyrinth that seemed to have driven her into a corner, leaving her without a choice and hope for help. The pet, warily stretching out its paw forward, firmly said that they should figure out how the labyrinth itself was arranged in order to avoid further difficulties and deal with its intricate passages and hidden traps that threatened their path. The pet's paw carefully pushed through the thick bushes, trying to feel them in order to understand what was hidden behind this natural barrier, which perhaps could suggest the way or warn of new dangers hidden behind its green wall. Suddenly, as if on command, the vines unexpectedly grabbed the cat, instantly began to pull her forward, but Lucilia did not lose her head, firmly grabbing the animal to save it and not let it die in this dangerous place. In the end, they were both dragged away by an unknown creature, and the girl, exhausted and weakened, blinked tiredly, trying to discern at least something in the absolute darkness, but everything around remained swallowed up by the abyss, and not the slightest light was visible. The noblewoman, feeling that she needed to be on her guard, began to look around, but all she saw was a complete lack of any landmarks or signs of life in this dark and lifeless place, which seemed to be swallowed up by silence and emptiness. Suddenly, while walking, the lady accidentally stepped on a magic seal, and her foot, touching the mysterious symbol, felt a strange warmth, as if the seal itself had reacted to her presence, instantly activating and filling the space with energy. The animal and the noblewoman, frightened by the unexpected event, recoiled in fear when something suddenly appeared in front of them that began to glow brightly, as if illuminating all the surrounding darkness, creating an unusual and dangerous atmosphere. A huge, vicious wolf appeared in front of them, as if from nowhere, its face distorted with rage and cruelty, and its eyes, full of hatred, sparkled with an ominous light, creating the feeling that it was ready to pounce on them at any moment with a furious onslaught. The monster, vastly superior in size and strength, towered over them, its massive form seeming almost invincible, and the noblewoman felt horror creep into her soul as she realized its true danger. Frightened, with a trembling voice, Debbie carefully stated that they should slowly retreat back so as not to provoke the monster, which continued to watch them menacingly, remaining ready to attack at any moment if they made an unnecessary move. The wolf had an unusually snow-white fur like a ghost, and its eyes sparkled with an icy light as if devoid of emotions, which added even more horror to this incredibly sinister creature standing before them, like the embodiment of a nightmare. The noblewoman, overcome with fear, began to slowly retreat, trying not to make any sudden movements, but suddenly she stepped on a stick, and a loud crack was heard, which seemed to echo in the dark silence, attracting the attention of the monster. The beast, sensing the approach of danger, was consumed by rage, and its eyes, blazing with a scarlet light, resembled a flame ready to burst out. Its entire body literally vibrated with furious anger aimed exclusively at its victim. Lucilia, paralyzed with fear, froze in place, realizing that now the monster would definitely not spare her, and would probably tear her to pieces, because her chances of salvation seemed insignificant in front of this ruthless creature. The lady closed her eyes in fear and panic, trying to protect herself from the imminent threat, when the monstrous creature, with a deafening roar like a deadly shadow, rushed towards her, ready to tear the beauty to pieces in the blink of an eye. But suddenly, as if by magic, a hero appeared, who pressed the lady to himself with force, not giving the beast even the slightest chance to harm her in an instant, becoming her protection and a barrier in this deadly clash which could have ended fatally. Lucilia slowly opened her eyes, and looking at her savior in amazement, recognized him. It was her husband, and for a moment a feeling of relief arose in her heart, mixed with surprise and many other emotions that she absolutely did not expect to experience at that moment. Davier, with unperturbed calm, explained that his wife had been gone for a long time, and worried, he decided to go and check where she was, worried about her safety, because her disappearance clearly did not leave him indifferent. After a pause full of sadness, he quietly added that Lucilia had not wanted to see him before, and with undisguised regret asked if this was the reason she had decided to run away from him, leaving him in ignorance and loneliness. The aristocrat asked again in bewilderment what he was talking about, because she was always glad to see her husband, and could not understand why he now seemed so tense and strange, as if a barrier had arisen between them. The girl realized with horror that her husband seemed angry, although she had only gotten lost in the garden, and could not find her way back, not suspecting that her disappearance would cause such a storm of emotions and such a strong reaction on his part. Her gaze met the icy gaze of the guy, in which such rage was burning that it seemed he was ready to take out all his accumulated anger on her, not wanting to even try to understand her reason or listen to an explanation, preferring to remain in his emotions. Suddenly, a smile full of tenderness and affection appeared on the Duke's calm face, as if all the tension and coldness had instantly disappeared, giving way to warm feelings that he decided to hide behind this unexpected but sincere smile. The man easily stated that he was only joking, and his face immediately became calm, as if all the tension that had heated up their conversation had instantly disappeared, leaving behind only lightness and a warm smile on his lips. Lucilia, having calmed down a little, said that she and the knight had gone for a walk, and suddenly they had been disturbed by a strange lady with red hair who had intervened in their world without warning, causing excitement and anxiety. Her hands involuntarily joined together, and the name of the guardian sister sounded in the air as if the word was connected with a long-forgotten or hidden memory that should awaken his interest and make him pay attention to the importance of this moment. The noblewoman, with anxiety in her eyes, awaited her husband's reaction, realizing that, judging by his expression, he too knew this family connection, and this omen could open up new, unexplored paths in their relationship. Upset and with a restless look, Lucilia began to torment herself with thoughts about what connected her husband with that lady. Questions arose in her mind whether there were some hidden feelings between them, and that she could not notice until she faced this strange moment. Under a clear blue sky among the green trees, in the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves, there suddenly sounded an offer to return home to the cathedral, where an atmosphere of peace reigned, and where everything seemed so familiar and calm, like an old cozy corner. The Duke, with warmth and sincerity, suggested to his beloved that they skip the banquet and spend the evening together, enjoying each other's company in solitude, as if wanting to return to those moments when their world was only theirs. The noblewoman froze in surprise, not expecting to see such a reckless and naive, childish act from him. Despite her confusion, her eyes expressed quiet bewilderment, and unexpected emotions stirred in her heart that she could not immediately understand. Soon the celebration began, and the noblewoman, in a magnificent red dress, stood frozen in admiration, looking at the city with interest and a sense of delight, as if discovering a new world full of wonders and unexpected discoveries. Her husband stood next to her, shrouded in the shadow of his cloak, and the beauty herself, with deep curiosity in her eyes, explored the territory of Montefeltro, encountering for the first time its grandeur and the smallest details that had previously been hidden from her sight. The young couple moved forward, merging with the flow of people that filled the noisy streets, and in this seething movement, they seemed like two separate stars, who, despite the bustle around them, illuminated their way in this stormy world. Yesterday Sir Dietrich came to the lady and, bowing deeply, apologized for leaving her alone in the garden, his voice full of remorse and his look sincerely reflected regret for what happened, as if he was seeking forgiveness for his actions. The mysterious building, shrouded in mystery and mysticism, did not give the lady any peace. It was guarded by a monster from the darkness, as if some important and dangerous secret was hidden in it, which beckoned her mind, forcing her to look for answers to her questions. Suddenly absorbed in her thoughts, the girl felt her husband's finger gently touch her cheek. Davier, looking at her with a soft but insistent gaze, asked what she was thinking about, instantly tearing her out of her thoughts and returning her to reality. The handsome man, with a slight smile, asked his companion to focus only on him, reminding her that they had come a long way together, overcoming all obstacles and difficulties to be here, enjoying every moment in each other's company in complete unity. Suddenly, the newlyweds' attention was drawn to a strange voice, which sounded unexpectedly and sharply from behind their backs, forcing them to freeze in place, stopping and listening, trying to understand what would happen at this moment. It turned out to be a cotton candy seller, who with a friendly smile offered the gentleman to buy a sweet treat for his companion, hoping not only to please, but also to add a little magic to this unforgettable moment of their walk. Davier, about to refuse, stopped in the very impulse, noticing how his beloved was watching what was happening with admiration and almost magical attention, which made him think before saying anything. Lucilia looked at the cotton candy with fascinated interest, as if it was something completely new to her, and her eyes were filled with genuine surprise, giving everything around her an extraordinary brightness, as if the world was opening up to her for the first time. The wind quietly whispered, playing with the branches of the trees. Their leaves shimmered in the golden rays of the sun, and a unique festive atmosphere hung in the air as bright flags fluttered everywhere, creating a feeling of magic and boundless joy. Lucilia laughed merrily as she tried various sweets. Her face glowed with happiness and genuine delight, and her laughter was so infectious that it attracted the attention of those around her, creating an atmosphere of lightness and carefree fun. Davir smiled softly, feeling a warm satisfaction in his heart that he was able to give his companion such a simple but sincere joy, making her happy even thanks to such seemingly insignificant things as food. The two of them sat down on a bench to take a short rest after the long and eventful festival, enjoying the peace and quiet that seemed so necessary after the excitement and vivid impressions of the day. The noblewoman, not forgetting about her friends, showed concern and bought them gifts, and also bought a collar for her favorite cat, trying to please everyone who was dear to her and emphasize her attention to their needs. In addition, she decided to buy several drinks and various musical instruments, taking into account all the tastes and preferences of her friends, so that each of them would feel special on this day of celebration and joy. Lucilia hoped that such celebrations would be held more often, but she realized that if this became a regular practice, it would be difficult for citizens to constantly organize such large-scale and joyful events as they do today. The man expressed the opinion that the lady clearly cared about her subjects like a real duchess, showing care and attention not only to herself, but also to the well-being of the entire people, which testified to her true virtue. The wind gently swayed the leaves of the trees, creating a melodic noise, and the starry sky stretched overhead, filling the night with a special magic and sorcery that seemed to penetrate the soul and give this moment an unforgettable atmosphere. The aristocrat politely asked the lady how she was feeling, showing concern for her well-being, and perhaps hoping to find out if she was hiding anything that might be bothering her at the moment. Asta looked wary, her gaze full of suspicion, as if she was hiding her true intentions, and it seemed as if her behavior was filled with mystery, leaving a sense of possible tricks or traps in the air. It is quite possible that the Duke noticed how diligently and attentively his wife studied, and understanding her tension, decided to amuse her, filling the atmosphere with light humor in order to at least relieve the tension a little and give her joy. The girl smiled, her eyes filled with the light of gratitude, and sincerely thanking the guy for his concern, she felt how his attention warmed her soul, filling this moment with special warmth and joy that would remain in her memory for a long time. The nobleman said with genuine warmth that he was deeply touched by her words, and then with a gentle smile and a look full of respect, he extended his hand to his beloved, inviting her to return to him, expressing all the love and care that he could give only to her. The handsome man stood up from his seat, deciding to surprise his companion with something interesting that could amaze her again, and perhaps reveal to her another side of his personality full of unexpected surprises and vivid impressions. The noblewoman looked down in admiration, leaning on the railing, enjoying every moment as her gaze took in the beautiful city spread out below, as if opening up a new, enchanting picture before her. The view of the city spreading out before my eyes was truly breathtaking, filling my heart with both delight and peace. The bustle and worries disappeared as if they were dissolving into thin air, and the world around me became perfect. Davier said with warmth in his voice that he had discovered this place as a child, and since then he had often come here to calm down and forget for a while about the storm in his life, finding in this solitude the silence and peace that he had always lacked. A beautiful landscape opened up before my eyes. Houses built of wood seemed small and cozy, and their simplicity only emphasized the harmony of this place, creating a feeling of warmth and comfort among the natural beauty. People calmly went about their business, they hurried, but there was no rush or fuss in their movements. Everything happened measuredly, and it seemed that each person knew their role in this harmonious flow of life, confidently continuing on their way. For the beauty, it was just a picturesque landscape, her gaze full of admiration, but for her husband, this place became not only a beautiful picture, but also salvation, the very corner where he dreamed of escaping to find solitude and free himself from all worries. Suddenly noticing his thoughtfulness, the lady carefully broke the silence, asking what had made him so sad, because her loving husband looked far from the way she was used to seeing him, always confident and full of determination. The noblewoman did not forget about her duties and studied diligently every day to become worthy of her role as a duchess, taking etiquette lessons, studying with mentors, striving to become a woman capable of supporting her husband in any circumstances. The lady sometimes felt afraid that she would fail, especially when writing official documents or studying complex texts, because every failure seemed like a step back, and doubts about her strength and abilities often tormented the girl. The noblewoman admitted that she was always tormented by the fear of disappointing her loved ones, the people who serve in this house, her friends, because she understood how important it was not to let down those who trust and support her in life and in the most difficult moments. Davier, on the other hand, had been faced with similar fears since childhood and was accustomed to loneliness and the lack of real support. He grew up in a world where trust was rare, and he had to take every step alone without the help of anyone who could understand him. A mature man most likely began to perceive his responsibility as an integral part of life, bearing its weight with dignity and without unnecessary regrets, because it was his burden that he always carried. For the beauty, it was just a picturesque landscape. Her gaze reflected admiration for the view, but for her husband, this place became not just a picture, but salvation, where he so passionately dreamed of finding solitude and, at least for a moment, forgetting all his worries, finding long-awaited peace. However, the beauty also understood perfectly the feeling of loneliness that Davier experienced, because she herself had previously been a prisoner imprisoned in the dungeon of her own fears and doubts, with no way out of her inner prison. She had long dreamed of getting out of this terrible place where ghosts became her only companions, and each new day was like excruciating torture, filled with viscous, suffocating silence and anxiety that squeezed her heart with immeasurable fear. The man was amazed. His eyes widened, and he did not expect such a revelation from his bride, because her words stirred in him not only surprise, but also the deepest sympathy for her past. When the boy finally found his voice, he admitted that there were very few people who had kept him silent from the excruciating shock, and this revelation shook him to the depths of his soul, forcing him to think about many things. The incredible beauty, without waiting for a continuation, confidently took a step forward. Her movements were full of determination and strength, as if she had made an internal decision to move forward, despite all the circumstances that could stop her. The charming and magnificent Davier, noticing her determination, carefully asked what his beloved intended to do now, since now that she had become his wife, she did not have to become a duchess if she did not want to. Lucilia, with complete firmness and unshakable confidence, declared that her only and absolute desire was to become the wife of an aristocrat, emphasizing that this was her final decision, which was not subject to doubt and would not change in the future. After all, in the role of an aristocrat's wife, a lady will be able to share with him the weight of responsibility that he bears on his shoulders and fully support him, helping him become a reliable support that he can rely on in any life situation. Smiling affectionately, the noblewoman tenderly said that she felt deep gratitude for everything he had done for her, adding that her heart was filled with love because she was truly in love with him and could not imagine her life without his presence. The sweet boy, stunned and confused, froze in place, his breathing becoming heavier and heavier, and his heart, as if awakened from a long sleep, began to beat furiously in his chest, making him feel every beat like never before. Soon a soft and mysterious smile appeared on his face, which seemed to illuminate his face, filling his gaze with sincere light, giving confidence in every movement, as if he radiated harmony and lightness in every gesture, showing his inner strength. A moment later, having collected all his thoughts, he began to talk about the fact that the long-awaited ceremony for which they had prepared so carefully was about to take place, and with each day the approaching date of the important event created a feeling of inevitability, filling the heart with excitement. After the ceremony, which filled the hearts of the guests with a solemn atmosphere, they will go to the capital where, as husband and wife, an important event awaits them, at which they will officially declare their union and appear before society. The coat of arms, depicting a majestic bird, represented the inviolability and strength of the imperial family, symbolizing their power and long-lasting tradition, which was known and respected by all. The nobleman said with obvious concern that he was worried about how difficult it would be for the girl in such conditions, especially with a large table when everything around seemed uncomfortable and overly solemn. He doubted how she would cope with this excitement. But for the beauty home was where her husband was, A majestic mansion towering among the greenery pleased the eye with its refined beauty and grandeur, like a living embodiment of their shared happiness and harmony. The servants stood tired, but at the same time excited, greeting their masters who had finally returned home, bringing with them a special light and an atmosphere of comfort that had become an integral part of this place, filling it with warmth and tranquility. Lucilia laughed merrily, her eyes sparkling with a bright shine and a sincere smile playing on her lips when she happily announced that she had not forgotten her friends and had brought them gifts that would fill their hearts with joy and gratitude for her attention and care. The servants were genuinely impressed, deeply touched by this gesture, and gratefully thanked their sweet, caring, and attentive mistress, feeling how her kindness and attention filled the house with warmth and comfort. Seeing the confused expressions on the servants' faces, Lucilia asked with genuine interest and gentle concern what had happened and why they looked so worried, seeking to understand the reasons for their concerns and help in the current situation. The maid, with a soft and inviting smile, invited the beauty to follow her, trying to help her with changing clothes because an important banquet was about to begin, and she hoped that the hostess would look impeccable corresponding to her high status. The butler, raising his voice, declared that he had important news which he was obliged to communicate to the gentleman immediately. The man's words sounded with such insistence that all those present noticed his seriousness. Tired, with a deep sigh, the man explained that an old acquaintance, a guest they had known for a long time, had come to the upcoming banquet. This news could not help but affect the atmosphere of the event, introducing an element of surprise. It was Asta, with bright red hair that matched the color of her dress, and she held a glass of drink in her hands, standing among the other aristocrats as if she were an integral part of this majestic picture. The noblewoman, smiling boldly and harshly, looked determined like a cunning fox. Her yellow eyes, full of confidence, quickly and carefully examined the room as if she was looking for something or someone, ready for any turn of events. Walking forward with the gentleman, the butler added that Lady Asta often changed her place of residence, constantly moving from one roomer to another, which could mean problems with her stability and finding a suitable place to live. The old man was also worried that the knight's sister might have said something wrong to the young madam, who was so fragile, gentle, and innocent that she could easily be misled or influenced in a bad way. After this, the butler, concerned about the situation, double-checked whether the gentleman was going to take any action regarding Lady Asta and everything that was happening around her, because the situation might require intervention. The Duke stopped, standing confidently in place, and firmly asked his friend not to worry about trifles that could distract from more important issues, because at this moment, small details did not matter. They stopped right in front of the beauty, who was at that moment talking to the maid, and her graceful posture, like magnetism, attracted the glances of all those present, forcing everyone to notice her presence and leaving no observer indifferent. Smiling affectionately, the Duke, despite any possible worries, firmly said that he had complete faith in his wife, assuring her that she was strong and wise enough to cope with any difficulties that might arise on her path. Lucilia, feeling her husband's gaze, turned and smiled softly in response, her face filled with tenderness, reflecting her calm and confidence next to him. The beautiful noblewoman was not afraid, because she was next to the one who became her support. The young couple froze in front of the closed door, and at that moment the girl felt a slight embarrassment, because the looks of the other nobles watching her as the Duke's new wife made her feel uncomfortable and insecure. Davier noticed her anxiety and gently asked if she was afraid, suggesting that they run away together, escape from attention and worries. However, Lucilia, with determination in her voice, shouted that they had to go to the banquet, not letting emotions get the better of them. Looking down, Lucilia quietly added that she was a little afraid of making a mistake in her manners, words, and actions, feeling the weight of responsibility for every step she took that could be noticed and appreciated at such an important moment in her life. Before they entered the room, the man leaned towards her gently and confidently, telling her to focus only on him and not to worry, because next to him she did not need to be afraid of mistakes or judgments. As the door opened, a bright light poured out, and the Duke and his wife, like true hosts, confidently walked out onto the balcony to greet the other nobles. They stood there, majestic and beautiful, attracting all eyes. The nobles who were the hosts of the event came out onto the balcony, their figures standing out sharply against the luxurious interior. Standing before the aristocrats, they froze, attracting the attention of all present, creating an atmosphere of solemnity and anticipation. The young couple appeared before everyone in an incredibly harmonious appearance, their blue outfits perfectly matched, emphasizing both their unity and refined elegance, which immediately attracted all eyes, making those present hold their breath. Davier, with genuine gratitude in his voice, thanked the assembled company for their presence, expressing the hope that they had had a wonderful time in his absence, enjoying the atmosphere of fun and cordiality which he hoped they had created for each other. The crowd froze in anticipation. Every eye was riveted on the Duke and his wife because everyone wanted to know who was the lady that the nobleman had chosen as his wife and what her role would be in this majestic society. The handsome man, with undoubted confidence and warmth, tenderly took his beloved by the hand and, with a soft smile on his lips, introduced her to everyone gathered. His voice, sounding calm and confident like music, filled this important moment with special meaning. Lucilia felt her heart beat faster, realizing that she now had to say her name. She paused for a moment to focus, preparing to speak her words with confidence and dignity. However, the lady quickly fell silent when she heard dirty rumors spreading behind her back, because she had once been the lover of a cruel archduke, and this shadow of the past, like a burden, still remained in the opinions of those around her. A shiver ran through the noblewoman's body as if from cold. Fear and horror seized her, and a wave of awkwardness slid down her back, making her feel even more vulnerable and unprotected in this society, burdened with many glances. The hands that clutched the fabric of her dress seemed to want to hide her nervousness, and she held on tightly to it, feeling how every gaze was directed at her and trying to calm her heart, which was beating wildly. Suddenly, all conversations were cut off when a fist, which had been gripping the balcony railing with such force, struck it with such a crash that it instantly attracted the attention of everyone present, causing them to freeze in anticipation of the next word. The lady stood frozen in shock and delight as her husband, with complete confidence and determination, firmly told everyone present to shut up and listen to his wife, suddenly becoming the defender of her honor. The nobles turned their gazes to the beauty, listening to her every word with bated anticipation. Lucilia began to speak, emphasizing that all the people gathered here are the source of happiness and strength, thanks to which their country prospers and maintains its greatness. The Duke, standing next to his wife, personified support and encouragement. His male gaze was full of confidence, readiness to intervene at any moment and help her find the right words if the situation required his participation. The lady bowed gracefully to the assembled aristocrats, introducing herself by her name with such sincerity and warmth that her joy at meeting the other citizens was noticeable to everyone present. The nobles, struck by the sophistication and sincerity of the new duchess's speech, immediately came to life and began to discuss her words, turning the hall into a sea of muffled hum in which admiration, respect, and genuine curiosity about her personality were mixed. The nobles then bowed respectfully in return, thus officially recognizing her position and status as a young noblewoman, and the Duke's wife, demonstrating their respect and willingness to accept her into their entourage. Lucilia smiled happily, feeling happiness and relief fill her heart because she was able to live up to expectations and not let her husband down at this very significant and solemn moment of their life together. With a light, almost weightless grace, the girl began to descend the wide staircase, her snow-white shoes on elegant high heels softly touching each step as if complementing her image, which radiated refined elegance and natural charm. After this, Lucilia and her husband, intertwining their hands in a gentle and graceful gesture, slowly walked to the center of the hall, where the guests' gazes awaited them to open the solemn dance which became the culmination of the evening, symbolizing their love and unity. When the first sounds of the melody filled the hall, the music sounded so soulful that the violins and other musical instruments merged into a magical chord that seemed to bring everything around to life, giving the event the atmosphere of a fairy tale evening. The girl's golden hair, like the rays of the morning sun, began to flutter softly in time with their dance, caught by a light breath of air, enhancing her charm and emphasizing the harmony of her movements with the music. The young couple waltzed smoothly, their movements so elegant and harmonious that they seemed to be one whole, harmoniously hovering to the sounds of enchanting music filling the hall with an atmosphere of sophistication and warmth. From time to time, Lucilia, feeling slightly embarrassed, would cautiously raise her gaze to her husband. Her eyes would timidly meet his, and she would lower them again, as if afraid that her feelings would become too obvious to those around her. The aristocrat looked impeccable. His blue eyes, radiating softness and tenderness, seemed to penetrate into the very soul, and his hair, neatly combed back, emphasized his nobility and refined appearance, attracting the admiring glances of those gathered. The lovely woman who was playing the melody on the violin gradually changed the rhythm to a calmer one, and the sounds of the music became quieter, slowly fading away as if dissolving into the air and leaving behind an enchanting trail of an unforgettable moment. Suddenly Lucilia, before she knew it, lost her balance, stumbled, and began to fall backwards. The woman's heart stopped for a moment from fear, and she felt her body moving towards the floor with inexorable speed, as if time slowed down in that moment. However, at the very moment her body began to fall, her husband's strong arms instantly wrapped around her slender waist, holding her with incredible strength and ease, as if she were a feather. Lucilia felt her fear disappear, giving way to confidence and security. At that moment, like a dance element, Davier lifted his bride into the air with such grace and confidence as if it were a natural course of dance, and she felt in his arms not just safe, but as if on a cloud. The nobles watched their dance in delight, amazed by the elegance and grace with which they moved. Their every movement was filled with harmony and beauty, captivating the attention of everyone present. Asta stood in the crowd along with other nobles watching the Duke dance with his wife, the woman's face partially hidden by her fan, and her eyes betraying a wave of emotion that she tried to hide but could not completely control. Her expression remained cold and emotionless, as if she was trying to hide any feelings that might betray her inner state, despite the tension in the air.